Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1291 of the War News stream. And we have very big news yet again today. We have heard that Poland is warning its citizens to leave Belarus immediately for urgent reasons. We're also hearing that U.S. F-35 fighter jets have been deployed near Venezuela, the same ones that bombed or got near Iran when the B-2 bombings occurred, amid heavy GPS jamming around Venezuela. And also, Russia's begun a militarization of the border with Finland, which is obviously extremely concerning. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as this will be the final live stream to run until the 11th of September, as I, the Enforcer, will actually be away on business for a couple of days. Nevertheless, we have been able to hear of major developments over the past 24 hours from around the world, as we have been able to hear that the USS Gerald R Ford strike group under the command of U.S. 6th Fleet and the U.S. EUCOM Command is currently near to the area of the city of Murmansk, just several hundred miles away, an incredibly significant force posturing position for the United States of America to be in against the Russian Federation. We have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation has now publicly announced that they will be building bases and relocating a large amount of combat forces near to the Finnish border, and according to the Russians, quote, for national security reasons. And they are stating that Finland's joining into NATO, along with some NATO states now having a small amount of armed forces in Finland, is significant enough to have the Russians respond with an even larger force than around the 100,000 Russian troops which are currently along the Finnish border at this moment. We have also been able to hear, moving into Central America, that the United States of America is continuing their force posturing against the nation of Venezuela, and it does appear that this is going to be furthering on into what appears to be inevitable strikes against the nation of Venezuela. We have been able to see that the USS Jason Dunham has currently cast its anchor inside of the port of Ponce, showing us a rare glimpse at the the destroyer that has been capturing headlines over the past few days, while at the same time, the United States Marines throughout the island have been using the beaches for preparations for amphibious landing drills. We actually were able to get footage published by the Department of Defense showing those amphibious landing drills over the course of the day. We have also been able to hear that the United States of America's representatives have further clarified that the 10 F-35 Lightnings currently based out of Puerto Rico are in preparation for strikes against Venezuela, and that this air wing that these F-35s were pulled from are the exact same air wing that supported and assisted the B-2 bombers in Operation Midnight Hammer against the Islamic Republic of Iran several months ago. We have also been hearing inside of the nation of Venezuela further information that has begun to emerge today that may be giving us a better idea in the public as to the foreign policy justifications for such an escalation against the Republic of Venezuela, as we have been able to confirm that there is growing Chinese influence inside the country as they have recently started to open oil drilling operations within Lake Maracaibo, which you can see here in the western side of Venezuela. We have also been able to hear of other significant news from around the world as well, outside of Northern Europe and Central America, as we've also been able to hear that the Eastern Theater Command of the People's Republic of China issued a statement condemning a joint venture of an Australian and other warships through the area of the Taiwan Strait. We are also hearing in the Middle East that there is currently going to be a vote tomorrow inside the Islamic Republic of Iran as to whether or not Iran will remain in the nonproliferation treaty, which states that Iran cannot create a nuclear weapon. In the meantime, multiple fiber optic cables laid at the bottom of the Red Sea have been mysteriously cut by some sort of an unknown entity, although the cuts are incredibly close to Yemeni Houthi-controlled territory. It is an absolute mystery as to who could have done that. We also are able to hear that the Republic of Iraq is currently conducting counterterrorism operations within northern Iraq at this moment, and we have also been able to hear on the front lines of Ukraine of significant battles that have occurred over the course of the day, and we have also been able to hear of a drone that landed inside of Poland, actually crashed inside of Poland, with Russian markings and insignia on it, but Polish authorities were quick to state that it does not appear to be a drone affiliated with the Russian army, and it actually appears to have been some sort of an illegal smuggling operation that was using a drone. We have a massive amount of news to cover tonight, a humongous amount of news, and we are going to be making sure to get y'all into each and every single little piece and bit of detail that we can of all of the major news stories that are developing around the world today. Moving us on into the most northerly part of the news today, and one of the most significant, we have been able to confirm that the USS Gerald R Ford and its strike group under the command of 6th Fleet is currently near to the area of Murmansk. We were able to confirm this today by multiple open source intelligence groups online, stating that some specific MH-60R Seahawks are currently flying in an area close to the coastline of Norway and also incredibly close to the Russian waters and the Northern Fleet based out of Murmansk. The Northern Fleet is one of the most powerful fleets in the Russian Federation, and technically on paper, it's the only one that is also has an aircraft carrier on its roster, although we all know the Kuznetsov is soon to be scrapped. It's just not been officially announced yet. Nevertheless, it does appear that the United States Navy, specifically with the arrival of the Gerald R Ford, is attempting to conduct some sort of a forced posturing action that is threatening Russia's largest and most powerful seagoing fleet. To give you an idea of how powerful this fleet is that the USS Gerald R Ford is facing down, or to at least give you all a little bit of a comparison as to why this fleet is claimed to be the most powerful inside of the Russian Navy, let me quickly bring y'all to the Northern Fleet of Russia and show y'all their largest ships that actually are operational, including their flagship. And so let me scroll down right here, and this is the surface fleet right here, and this is the flagship. The Kirov-class battle cruisers. These are the largest battle cruisers ever made in the world. All of these are Soviet era, and a lot of them were mothballed for an incredibly long time before being brought back into service. So, of course, by Western standards and U.S. Navy standards, these vessels are most likely not that competent or that powerful in an actual fight against us. Much like the Moskva wasn't really that big of a threat or a target for the Ukrainians and was easily destroyed at the very beginning of the Ukraine war. Nevertheless, this is one of the few fleets in the Russian Federation that does have operational Kirov-class battle cruisers, and not only that, a significant amount of nuclear-powered fast attack submarines, and also a wide variety of other cruisers and destroyers that also possess, at least on paper, a decent amount of firepower. The USS Gerald R Ford seems to have been strategically sent into this location, and of course many of y'all will know of the famous story that has come out at this point of the USS Gerald R Ford being directly threatened by what we're now assuming to be a Yasin Ericsson-class nuclear-powered fast attack submarine of the Russian Navy somewhere near to the area of the Shetland Islands. Not long after that, we were able to see that one of the largest submarine manhunts in the modern age was conducted, and it appears that while no public information was stated about the matter, we believe that around the third or fourth day of the search, the submarine was found, and from then on, tracked by NATO forces. It also appears that while the NATO forces were continuously tracking the submarine, the Gerald R Ford was pretty much steaming directly behind it, north around Norway, and directly around this area of Murmansk. Also, a lot of people are probably asking the question, why in the world would this MH-60R Seahawk, which is a special type of a Black Hawk made for the Navy, signify that the Nimitz is within the area, or more so the Gerald R Ford, correction, I'm sorry everyone, the Nimitz is the most common class of carrier we have, the Gerald R Ford is the most cutting edge and most advanced. But nevertheless, the reason why we would know that the Gerald R Ford is in the area is that the MH-60R Seahawks are incredibly specific in what type of ships more so operate them, and the Gerald R Ford class actually does have a wing of MH-60R Seahawks that operate from it. Also, the destroyers as well that are a part of the strike group, including the Arleigh Burkes, generally also carry MH-60R Seahawks as well. So the presence of this helicopter and the fact that it is identified as a U.S. Navy helicopter signifies that one of the destroyers or the carrier actually sent out a helicopter within the area, most likely to conduct an anti-submarine screen. This is also a standard operating procedure of most strike groups, as anti-submarine warfare heavily relies on the helicopters that are carried on board the destroyers or the carrier to be able to find these submarines first and foremost, and of course make sure that they're not posing a direct threat to the fleet, and if they are, destroy them immediately. These helicopters actually carry what are called sensor buoys, which they can drop right into the water, and once those buoys hit the water, a microphone extends on a cable below the buoy deep into the water, about 100 to 200 feet down. This hydrophone is actually able to pick up sounds of submarines from about a dozen miles away or so, at least some of the most advanced types. More normal types usually can detect a submarine from what we've heard publicly to about 8 to 10 miles out, just a little bit shorter in range. Nevertheless, this does clearly show that the Gerald R Ford is within the area, and this is incredibly dangerous for the Russian Federation, by the way, just to put this out there, at least as far as the potential of what could happen. The Gerald R Ford carries about 80 aircraft, including its fixed-wing and rotary wing aircraft, which means helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. This aircraft carrier, along with its strike group, has enough firepower to launch a crippling attack against the Northern Fleet, which most of the Northern Fleet's surface vessels are currently moored in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, and the air power of that fleet could also protect the entirety of the strike group, pretty much providing a screen, and also conduct additional airstrikes in support of operations of the U.S. Navy within this area. That is obviously not going to happen. We're not going to war with Russia tomorrow, but the thing about this sort of an operation is that we're wanting the Russians to think that that could happen, and put them on their toes a little bit, and once again remind them that the United States isn't exactly a weak nation, and could easily put the Russians on their knees, most likely within a couple of weeks, once an actual conventional war broke out. It does appear, however, that the Russians are responding at least to the situation in another way at the moment, as we were able to also confirm today that an official announcement was made by the Russian Ministry of Defense that they are now going to be constructing fortifications on the border with Finland along its entire length. The decision was explained by the Russian Foreign Ministry by the increased military activity near the border, which there's practically been none, and the Russians are using this false justification as a premise to be able to build up their forces directly along the Finnish border. Many of y'all who have followed the news in the past do know that the Russian Federation, since about the latter part of 2023, has kept a force of about 100,000 troops and support personnel within the area around the Republic of Finland's borders. This appears to now be expanded, at least with this public statement, and not only will these forces now be supported by actual permanent structures such as bases and other logistical facilities, but we are also assuming that this will be a guise, or generally a diplomatic justification, for the Russian Federation to build up its forces directly along the border with the Republic of Finland. This has been something that most people would have never seen in their lifetime, because throughout the entirety of the Cold War, Sweden and Finland had not been a part of NATO, and even in the post-Cold War world, up until just a few years ago, Sweden and Finland were never a part of the NATO alliance. It was after the war in Ukraine started that both Sweden and Finland began the ascension process to join join NATO had in a sense completely erased any of Russia's wishes or abilities to stop NATO expansion closer to their borders, because the Finnish border is about 1,000 miles long, and it is a shared border entirely with the Russian Federation. With Finland joining the NATO alliance, that pretty much meant that if the Russians were trying to stop an additional 1,000 miles of border being added with NATO in Ukraine, they lost that war because Finland ended up joining the NATO alliance and adding the 1,000 extra miles of NATO front line anyways. However, a lot of people are continuing to talk about this current situation with the USS Gerald R Ford, which is quite literally hovering right outside of Russian national waters, and is, of course, in a pretty threatening position against the Russian Northern Fleet. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this currently, or what the Russian response might be, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So not only did we send, at least publicly, we sent some nuclear submarines to the Russian coast a while back, but now apparently a U.S. aircraft carrier is also sitting off the Russian coast as well. So some pretty sizable deployments near Russia's coast, which should get them a little bit rattled, maybe, possibly. But 50% said Russia will respond to this with words only, while 22% said Russia will try to ignore the ship, and 21% said Russia will respond militarily. And here's the thing, folks. The U.S. has diplomatically not been very harsh on Russia. We've generally given them a pretty large berth and a leeway, basically, to do what they want. So even though these are very potent military deployments, and of course that does carry some weight behind it, I think Putin can generally rest easy that nothing's really going to happen from this, because our diplomatic actions have not really matched up to the, I guess you could say, the severity of these deployments. So in other words, Putin can rest easy. The U.S. is not going to attack Russia. I think it's pretty clear at this point. So it's basically all for show. Yes, it is a serious movement. It's something that should send a message of deterrence, but I really don't think Putin's going to take this seriously. And I believe that Russia will try to ignore the ship, so that way they don't have to respond in a military sense, and they generally can just sort of glaze over it without having to mention it in the public. That's probably what they're going to try to do with this, and I'm with the 22%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I'd have to be divided between the 49% and the 22% at the moment, and say that it really could go either way. The Russians may try to ignore the situation unless if it is publicly brought up in a statement either by the U.S. Department of Defense, the Office of the President, or the U.S. Secretary of State, or the Department of State as a whole. If any public statements are made about the location of the Gerald R. Ford by those departments, there most likely, highly likely, will be a response by the Russian Foreign Ministry or the Kremlin spokesperson, the Rat, at that point once those statements are made as a counter. However, the Russians generally don't want to show or depict on an international foreign policy level that they consider any actions of the United States to be threatening, like this. To be honest with y'all, the potential of this action right now is incredibly dangerous. We actually could end up destroying the Northern Fleet while it's sitting in port, at least theoretically. Obviously, the U.S. isn't going to war with Russia tomorrow, and I want to continue to make that incredibly clear, but as far as diplomatic force posturing maneuvers like these go, or as the Chinese would call them, a low-level coercion effort, they're supposed to put in your mind, well, we could do this, and we could blow up your entire fleet inside of the northern area of Russia, and pretty much do it sitting down with one hand tied behind our back. That's generally what we're wanting the Russians to think, but we're obviously not going to be conducting any sort of hostile action against the Russians. It's just to put them in a little bit of a fearful mindset, make them go, actually, America actually could steamroll us pretty quickly, and there really isn't a lot that we could do about that. So generally, I would have to say, if anything, they may respond with a worded statement and state that they condemn this unnecessary provocation by the United States, as it's only further destabilizing the global peace that currently exists, and we all know that the Russians love peace. That's probably what the Russian Foreign Ministry would say, or they're largely just going to ignore it and not really make a great comment about it. However, it does appear that they're already making a comment to Finland's ascension to NATO, which they already had done in the past, and now it appears that they're building onto it as of today and continuing to build their military presence along the Finnish border, possibly as a response to the ongoing situation in Ukraine and the ongoing pressure that the United States has put against countries like the Republic of India, which refuse to stop purchasing Russian crude oil. In a sense, pretty much pressuring Russia's customers to stop being their customers, which may be leading the Russians to get a little bit more aggressive even on the wordage sides of things on a diplomatic statement. Nevertheless, we are going to be moving on out of this area, at least at the... Well, actually, really quickly, before we move on from this area, there is a couple of other important pieces of news that are generally attached attached to this story as a whole that's going on in the Scandinavian regions, and that actually brings us into Belarus, because it also appears that at the same time today, the Polish government of the Republic of Poland has stated that Polish citizens must leave Belarus immediately. We have seen evacuation orders and notices like this before, especially throughout the entirety of the Middle East, made by multiple foreign ministries, and we've also seen these sorts of statements made specifically inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. But we have not ever seen a Polish statement aimed at Belarus. We've seen many of them directed at the Russians, never at Belarus, however. So this generally is suggesting to us that the Polish are starting to order their civilians to evacuate, once again as a part of continued Russian provocations, like the building up of Russian forces along the Finnish border, and also the building up of Russian forces along the Polish and Lithuanian borders in preparation for the Zapad 2025 military exercise, which is only about, most likely, a week away at this point. It is happening at some point in September. We still don't know exactly when. And even still, another interesting situation happened involving the Polish today that in a sense might implicate Belarus to some extent, although we don't really know exactly if it does. But moving all into the story, in southeastern Poland, we were able to hear that a drone of some type that appeared to have been Russian crashed inside of the country. And of course, this started to hit headlines throughout the entirety of Poland, because it does appear to be a repeat of the exact same type of incident that occurred recently, where a Russian Shahed 136 drone flew across the border, 80 kilometers inside of Poland, actually about 100 or so, which is about 70 miles, landed near a village and actually exploded inside of a field near to the town, damaging 3 buildings. This appeared to have been something similar, but it appears that Polish authorities, within hours, immediately dismissed this as a non-military drone, as a spokesperson for the Polish Defense Ministry stated that the object that fell in Poland was not a combat-capable drone, and it showed no military characteristics. They also added it was most likely a smuggling drone. And smuggling what? I don't know. I have no clue.
I kind of get the odd sense, and obviously we don't have any evidence of it, but I kind of get the odd sense that maybe Poland is trying to tamp down these escalations, because remember the last time a drone struck Poland? The last one was armed with a warhead. It actually exploded on Polish territory. I think it was about 80 kilometers into Polish territory. So they tried to play that down. They kind of tried to ignore it a little bit. Of course, they had to acknowledge it because it literally blew up right next to a village and actually damaged some buildings. So they had to acknowledge it in the public. But it seems like Poland is trying to take the de-escalation route on pretty much every Russian provocation, because I really have some very big doubts that that was merely a smuggling drone that went into their territory, considering the fact that it was literally right on the Ukrainian border, and also it appeared to be a surveillance drone of some sort. It seems like it might have been a Russian drone that once again either went errant or it was intentionally sent into Poland. That would seem to be more logical, because smuggling what? Like you just mentioned, what are they smuggling? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
And they're smuggling the hopes and dreams of the Russians away and into Poland, because they just became a $1 trillion economy just a couple of days ago. I guess, I don't know. Maybe they're importing hope. I have no clue. Because the Russians are hopeless, and that hope's got to be going somewhere. So maybe they're smuggling it out to a country like Poland. But the whole story doesn't really add up, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, to be entirely honest with y'all. And, of course, that may just be from a lack of information that they're providing, but at the same time, why is there a lack of information? There's a decent amount of questions that surround that story that we really don't have good answers to at the moment. So I would generally say, folks, that probably highly likely was a Russian reconnaissance drone, but that's about it. I mean, there's really not much more that we could extrapolate from that. They provided as minimal information as they could to the public, rather than it doesn't appear to have any military characteristics. But at the same time, a military drone doesn't always have to have a warhead on board. There are loads of different types of drones, like the Orlan, that are reconnaissance only and carry no warhead, meaning that if they crash inside of your country, they're not going to blow up. And then you could try and claim that it's not a military drone because it didn't have a warhead on board. So once again, we're going to leave that story for what it is. While we take government statements at face value here on the channel, and we have to by our rule, at the same time, it appears that there may be some effort to try and, like Matthew said, tamp down the ongoing escalations that the Russian Federation is conducting against Poland and not lead to any further escalations due to these sorts of incidents. Case in point, the story right here. But moving on out of all of the information and developments that are, of course, a result of the rising tensions inside of Eastern Europe at the moment, we have to now move to all the rising tensions that are currently happening inside of the Caribbean, as it does appear that there is a lot going on within this area, and there's a great deal of potential that this will most likely turn into a full-time news segment here on this channel nightly, as it does appear that it'll be evolving into some sort of a larger conflict here within the near future. Before we move on to that, however, I do want to circle back and talk about the Finnish border situation and the Russian announcement that they will be building up forces along the Finnish border. And a lot of people are wondering whether this is preparation for war by the Russians against the NATO alliance, or if it's something else. Are they actually acting defensively, or is it something else entirely different than that? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we have heard, based on many different reports, that Russia is now fortifying the border with Finland, citing security threats, and they're worried that Finland is going to invade Russia, which is insane on its face. So is it Russian war prep getting ready to do something or attack Finland? And it looks like 49% said yes, Russia is preparing an attack on Finland, and 22% said no, Russia is really acting defensively here, and 21% said it seems like a 50-50 on this. And Finland is not attacking Russia. I think pretty much everybody in our chat knows that. Everybody that watches this show, that keeps up with news, knows that Finland is not attacking anybody. NATO is purely a defensive alliance. They do not go on the offensive. That's never been the case. It's literally in the charters of the defensive alliance. So Finland's not attacking anybody. But what this does line up with, though, is Medvedev, a very volatile Russian official, has been trying to lay the groundwork for a false flag attack against NATO. And he's saying that NATO and the Baltic states, and also maybe even Finland, are trying to coordinate an attack on Russia, which sounds to me obviously extremely unbelievable, and it sounds like a way to create a false pretext to basically attack one of those countries and then claim self-defense by the Russians. So I would say, to me, it sounds like it's 50-50. The Russians are probably halfway acting in defense because, of course, they're trying to prepare for a war with NATO, so they got to have defense, but at the same time, they're kind of keeping the door open for an attack on one of these NATO countries if they want to pull it off. So I'm with the 20%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I do not believe that this is a defensive action whatsoever. I'd have to be with the 51%. This appears to be preparation by the Russians for some sort of an attack against NATO. We are already seeing that a lot of these justifications are starting to lay out a large amount of Russian forces near to NATO borders. And let's make it clear exactly how much this encompasses at the moment. Because of the Zapad exercise, there is a large buildup of Russian forces in Kaliningrad and also in northwestern Belarus at the city of Grodno, also pronounced Grodno. We also are hearing now that Dmitry Medvedev is trying to lay out some sort of a justification for the Russian Federation to claim a defensive framework to the buildup of Russian forces along the borders of Latvia and Estonia. Now we are hearing in a public statement today that the Russian Federation actually is building up even more forces against the Finnish border and also building out bases and logistical facilities to support those forces in that area long term. When you put that all together, they literally are building up forces along the entirety of the NATO border that exists with the Russian Federation right now. There is not a single spot to be spared where there is a gap or any sort of a void of Russian forces along that border frontier. That is something that is clearly showing us that the Russian Federation isn't building up its forces for a preparation of a defensive. The only reason a nation moves its forces directly along a border of another country that they believe is unfriendly to them is a preparation for invasion. Think about it. When in the world did the Russian army build up along Ukraine's borders before the outbreak of war with the Ukrainians? It was right before the war. They didn't do that for national defense. They did that under the guise of national defense in quote-unquote war games, and the entire time it was a preparation for an offensive invasion into the state of Ukraine. This is a very similar sort of a thing right here. And as a matter of fact, folks, this is the exact same sort of a thing that Adolf Hitler did leading up to Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union in 1941. It was the same type of buildup. The Germans started to build up their forces inside of Poland for quite some time, and endlessly the NKVD and Red Army intelligence continued to tell Stalin there's a buildup going on, and it looks like it's pretty bad. It actually looks like the Germans are preparing for some sort of an invasion. And in response, Stalin said, "Oh, absolutely not. Hitler would never do that. That's absolutely ridiculous and it's stupid. Nobody would ever invade the Soviet Union, especially Germany. We just signed a treaty with them a few years ago to split up Poland. That's ridiculous." And then they started the invasion, because whenever anyone builds up a force along your border, there's only one thing that could amount to, and it would be a preparation for an armed invasion. That's how it is every time. And even if it's not the case, they are trying to imply that they could, and that has to be responded to accordingly. On top of that, another thing that I have to say is that these justifications are incredibly poor, like wildly poor if you actually look at it from an analytical perspective. And this brings us back, obviously, to the force disposition map, which hasn't had a lot of progress made on it, at least for a while now, because there's been a lot of other things going on behind the scenes. But it still does show a pretty interesting sort of a scene. None of the Baltic states, I want to make this quite clear, none of the Baltic states would conduct an armed invasion against the Russian Federation. One, there would be absolutely no political support in any of these republics to conduct an invasion like that against Russia. And two, their militaries aren't even really structured, except for Lithuania's, to ever even go on the offensive. Lithuania's Iron Wolf Brigade actually is structured to be an offensive and defensive mechanized brigade, and does have the integrated support abilities to be able to do such a thing, along with the other Lithuanian brigades that exist inside their country as a part of the 1st Division. But the rest of Estonia and Latvia is not designed for any sort of an offensive operation. The only standing brigade that permanently exists in Latvia is the Land Forces Mechanized Infantry Brigade. This is the only brigade under Latvia's command that is a full-time fighting force. Inside of Estonia, there's two, and one of them isn't even really a full fighting division. There's the 1st Infantry Brigade, somewhat similar to the Iron Wolf Brigade in Lithuania in a way, in that it does have some integrated fire support like anti-tank weapons, but in terms of artillery, it's fairly light, meaning that this would more so be posed in a defensive position more than an offensive one, as it wouldn't be able to support its own advance with any kind of artillery cover. The 2nd Division of Estonia's armed forces is generally a reservist division, and while technically a semi-professional brigade on paper, it is still made up halfly of reservists, meaning that this would not be able to conduct a full-scale offensive, as we generally consider, at least in wargaming scenarios, that reservist forces or half-reservist forces generally will not have the morale, cohesion, or level of professionalism as a full-time army or a full-time brigade on the field. So none of these countries in the Baltics, except for Lithuania, could conduct an offensive largely. And Finland, even more so, is not structured for offensive operations. Finland's army is somewhat smaller, at least in terms of its professional standing force, and the rest of the armed forces of Finland are practically a nationalized militia of a sort that are made up of reservists that would be called forward in the event of an armed invasion, meaning that Finland's being invaded. So even in that hypothetical scenario, Finland's armed firepower really comes in the event of them being attacked and invaded. And even still, that there's some questions as to the efficacy of those Finnish reservist groups, considering that there may not be a large amount of armor, equipment, supplies, or artillery to be able to augment and support those units at the outbreak of a war. But nevertheless, all four of these countries have absolutely no capability to conduct an offensive. They can conduct offensives, and that's generally what their armed forces are designed in full form to do, but any sort of an offensive operation is out of the picture. So any Russian objectives or justifications to put forces along the border, one isn't because they're actually scared of the Baltics or Finland. There's really no reason to be. None of them are designed to be able to conduct an offensive into Russia, and who the hell in those countries would support that kind of an idea? That's just stupid. It doesn't really make any sense. So this is all being done. The only obvious conclusion could be that they're doing it to prepare for some kind of an invasion. Now, also, by the way, I do have to say this, folks. If Russia said Poland was trying to invade them, then there's kind of like a legitimate claim there, because Poland is a well-armed enough and powerful enough country on paper. They actually could invade the Russians pretty much on their own and give the Russians a pretty damn good beating. So if the Russians wanted to say that Poland was preparing to invade Kaliningrad, that is maybe the only justification on an analytical perspective that actually could stick, even if you were able to find the complete lack of political will in Poland to be able to do something like that, which most people in Poland would not be in support of conducting an offensive war against Russia. But it's the only country that is directly bordering Russia in any way in Eastern Europe that has so much firepower that an attempted invasion of Russia is definitely possible and probably could succeed, at least to some extent. But nevertheless, moving on out of Eastern Europe, it is time for us to move on into the Caribbean, as we do have a lot of news coming from that area. But before we move on into that, I said that twice now, before we move on, we actually have another question for all of y'all about what's going on with the urgent request for Polish citizens to leave Belarus. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so this is a very quick poll right here, a very brief question. Since we did hear that Poland is warning its citizens to leave Belarus immediately for urgent reasons, what is going on and what triggered that warning out of the blue? So it looks like 56% said Zapad, the military exercise between Belarus and Russia, triggered the warning, while 37% said it's a general precaution by Poland. And I would pretty confidently say that Zapad was probably the trigger for this warning. Poland and also the surrounding Baltic states are treating Zapad like a potential invasion force. And I would say it's a very wise approach to it because it is sizable enough to be an invasion force. And it looks like they're trying to basically get all their people out of Belarus in case it does turn into that. That way, they're not trying to do a rescue mission to get Polish civilians out of that country in case it does go down. So it looks like, based on all signs, warnings, and indications, that all the Baltic states, and also Poland as well, believes that this could be a prelude to an invasion. At least that's what we're seeing right now. So we'll have to wait and see if that's the case. And I think we'll find out very soon. We might actually find out why the enforcer's gone if it turns into an invasion. It could happen that quick. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that the Zapad exercise certainly did trigger this warning for Polish citizens to leave Belarus immediately. I'm kind of shocked any of them are even in Belarus for an announcement like that to be made, but it most likely is going to be a direct result of that, as there isn't a lot of other developing situations that will require for Polish citizens to leave Belarus, except for that one, because that could be a prelude or an actual beginning of an armed invasion into Eastern Europe. If the Russian Federation wanted to kick it off, that is the perfect time. So that's what we would generally believe, at least at the moment, with the lack of information that we have, is that that is the general underlying reason as to why that evacuation order is being announced. But moving on from Eastern Europe and on into the Caribbean finally, to make sure that we get on into all of the major news that's happening down here, as there is a lot. And I also have to say, folks, that as far as things look like they're going, it's very important that people pay attention to this news segment, because it is going to most likely become incredibly important within the next few weeks. We have been able to hear that more U.S. force buildups are occurring within this area. We actually were able to hear that the USS Jason Dunham, which has been buzzed twice by Venezuelan aircraft within the area of the Caribbean, both times those Venezuelan aircraft were armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, has actually cast its anchor inside of the port at Ponce, inside of Puerto Rico. We were actually able to get some pictures of the vessel after it had come into port for a brief moment, and here are a couple of them. You can actually see that the vessel is not squeaky clean, clearly showing that it's been underway at sea for a little bit of time inside the Caribbean. And it's also giving us the very rare look at the ship that has pretty much become famous at this point in the Caribbean for being the one that's had the most brush-ins with the Venezuelan Air Force out of any. We have also been able to see on the other side of the island that the United States Marines 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit is continuously conducting landing exercise drills in preparation for what may become an amphibious landing against Venezuela, or this may be more so an attempt to conduct a forced posturing against Venezuela to show them that it is entirely possible for the U.S. to invade their coastline and then start a larger offensive inland into the rest of Venezuela. But here's some of the footage from that landing exercise today. We can actually see one of the Marines hovercraft coming in, supported by AH-1Z Vipers, and also flanked on both sides by UH-1Y Venoms. We now see the LAVs, one of the Marines armored personnel carrier and infantry fighting vehicles, coming off of the hovercraft and now making their way further inland.
These are pretty large exercises. I had heard that the Puerto Rican mayor, or one of the mayors in Puerto Rico, was saying this was the largest one he's seen in over, I think it was like a decade or something. So pretty large. Also, it's kind of weird. This is the practice for an invasion force right here. This is not practice for a strike campaign. This is for invasion, which seems to be something that personally I would still say is a low likelihood. So maybe it's just a big show of force.
I think it may be a show of force, but it is a little bit interesting to note that all of these vessels, the hovercraft and so on, are most likely coming from the LHD, the USS Iwo Jima, which we do not see, at least at the moment, on screen in that video, but is the larger bulk of the amphibious ready group that is within the area. LHDs are specifically designed to operate and support amphibious landing operations, and generally are comprised entirely of marine, aviation, and amphibious strike group capabilities. You can actually see that here in this picture with the AH-1Z AH-1Z Vipers, the Seahawks, and other types of helicopters commonly used by the Marine Corps on the flight deck of this LHD. The hovercraft actually are carried inside of the LHD in an internal bay at the back, and I actually got to say, proud honor of the channel, we actually have a clip of that internal bay in the intro in the Armed Forces medley. When the Navy song plays, you can actually see a Navy ensign guiding in one of those hovercraft back into the rear bay of one of these LHDs. It may not be the Iwo Jima, however. Really quickly, let me see. I believe this is actually a picture here of what the inside kind of looks like in the LHD to an extent. But you can actually drop out amphibious vehicles out of the back and allow them to wade to shore, or you can actually drop off the hovercraft as well out of the back of this LHD and then allow them to make their way rapidly to shore. You can actually see one of those LCACs right there. A little bit of an interesting sort of a thing with how amphibious operations work. This LHD is supported by other amphibious support vessels. I believe the USS San Antonio is one of them. And really quickly, let me see if I can show y'all the San Antonio class amphibious transport docks. These pretty much augment the abilities of the LHDs, like the USS Iwo Jima, and are able to help bring forward the entirety of the 22nd MEU into the area. Generally, across all three vessels, the USS Iwo Jima, the USS San Antonio, and the other San Antonio class support vessel that's within the area, they are actually able to field the entire power of the 22nd MEU, all 4,500 men, on board these three vessels and support their amphibious operations with greater indirect fire support provided by the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke and Ticonderoga class missile cruisers, which are currently inside the area. Hypothetically speaking, it is possible for this small MEU, well, it's not really that small, it's still about 4.5 thousand men, it is entirely possible for this Marine Expeditionary Unit to actually conduct landfall inside of Venezuela and take a port. Not to say that that would be a good idea, but it is something that could be done. Generally, this one Marine Expeditionary Unit, however, is not going to be expected to take on the entirety of the Venezuelan military on its own. Generally, what it would do is that it would make landfall, most likely around a port. Generally, I try and use this port right here, Cadia Lamar, as a good example, and it would end up pushing through the town rapidly, securing the airport, and after the airport is secured, at that point, they're pretty much holding the perimeter until more forces come in. So basically, if we're talking about a hypothetical invasion here, how this would work is that this first Marine Expeditionary Unit, its only task is to make landfall on the beaches, storm into the town, take the airport, take the port, and then create a perimeter and hold that until relieved. The relief forces would come in most likely by the Air Force. The Air Force and the Navy would most likely at that point be providing some sort of an air screen, engaging and destroying Venezuelan air defenses, while at the same time C-5 Galaxies and C-17s would be flying into this airport, most likely with still usable runways at that point, and immediately dropping out of the back of its rear doors more forces from the U.S. Marines or the U.S. Army directly into the town of Cadia Lamar. Once those forces make it to the perimeter that the 22nd MEU would have created, they'll expand the perimeter a little bit farther and make sure to start covering key access points or egress points that the Venezuelans could use to make contact with those forces and try and push them back out to sea. Most importantly, the highway along the coast and also the highway from Caracas through the mountain passes. Marine AH-1Z Vipers from the USS Iwo Jima could most likely provide a great deal of support in holding this highway inside the mountains, as it's an incredibly difficult passage. I've done a good amount of research on that, and it appears that there really is no other way through the mountains rather than this one major highway, meaning that if the landing forces coordinate a lot of their efforts and perimeter directly on these highways, a lot of Venezuelan armored activity or rapidly mobilized forces would be nullified or stopped by the defensive barrier or the blocking force directly on those highways, meaning that U.S. forces could continue to be funneled in at the airport at Cadia Lamar, most likely not under fire at that point, and continue to expand their perimeter until they were prepared to conduct a significant offensive deeper into Venezuela, most likely a direct attempt at taking the city of Caracas. Although that would be somewhat difficult, actually, because much like the Venezuelans would have to advance on Cadia Lamar through the singular highway from Caracas, the United States armored forces, not the infantry necessarily, the infantry can be airborne or heliborne for the larger part and transported by helicopter, but the armored forces would have to advance down that very same highway to make its way into Caracas, meaning that the same bottleneck that would at least help U.S. landing forces initially may end up becoming a significant obstacle for U.S. ground forces to push further inland if this kind of invasion was conducted. Generally, I've got to say that conducting this sort of an action at the moment might not be a great idea. There is a statistical probability that this could go swimmingly, but there's also a statistical probability that this could go insanely bad, and we could be there for years. And considering that we are seeing at the moment that there are a lot of larger fish to fry, like the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, this doesn't really seem to be a well-balanced or thought-out sort of an operation, at least at the moment, because this could end up tying up U.S. forces for quite a long time, possibly even years, and during those years, we could see that other major developments, like a war in Europe or a war in the Indo-Pacific, may break out, and these forces would not be able to move into those areas as they would be holding down or attempting to support a new Venezuelan interim government during that period. But it does appear that, at least in some sense, this may all be connected in a greater framework or a bigger picture at this moment, because we were able to confirm that inside of Lake Maracaibo today, within western Venezuela, that there is a large amount of growing Chinese influence. And in a sense, this might actually end up becoming a smoking gun for a larger part. The Chinese have actually installed their first floating platform inside of Lake Maracaibo to conduct extraction of oil from Venezuela's largest untapped oil field, which is under the lake. This is something that's generally starting to show us, a lot like the situation with Panama, that there is a great deal of growing influence that the People's Republic of China has over the nation of Venezuela at this moment. And not only are the Chinese extracting that precious oil, but it is also showing the kind of grip and hold that the People's Republic of China is starting to gain over the nation of Venezuela, which may be extending this outside of a pretty much a Monroe Doctrine style policy and more into that of Chinese isolation. Well, not really isolationism, but containment. We do understand
It's still not about It's still not about the oil, though. Like, I saw some people taking my tweet earlier and saying, oh, yeah, I told you it was about the oil. Like, it was all about going down to Venezuela. The U.S. wants to go get that oil out of their country. It's not about the oil, folks. It's still not that. The Chinese are trying to access the oil, but that's not the primary reason we're concerned. The Chinese are getting a major foothold over Venezuela. Right now in South America, the most hostile country to the United States is Venezuela. They are the most hostile country to the United States, and they're literally right down there in South America, not too far away from our country. So that's the concern. And it's just indicative of how deep China really is into Venezuela right now, is because if they're installing oil rigs and Maduro's letting them do that, and also Maduro's holding up Chinese-made cell phones and saying that he was gifted it by Xi Jinping, clearly the relationship runs deep. Like, I think that's pretty clear at this point. And the U.S. president is interested in deterring China completely at this point. He's pissed with China. He's basically picking a fight with China, and China's picking a fight with us. And the first way to combat China is to deal with them in South America. I think that's the strategy. It's not about the oil, in my opinion, because the U.S. has more oil than we know what to do with, and I don't think that's the main reason we're heading down there.
I would have to say that it's most likely not the reason why we're heading down there, because I also have to point out, folks, that there are a lot of countries in the world that do produce a far greater amount of oil that we could generally fry those fish instead of the Venezuelan fish. And really quickly, let me show you the top oil producers of 2024, at least on a hopefully yearly or daily basis. So let me see if I can go get that for 2024 specifically, and let's go see what we would have. So this currently, at least in 2024, was a production in millions of barrels per day of some of the largest oil-producing countries in the world. The United States, obviously, is number one. A lot of people actually, oddly enough, don't know that, but the United States is a major producer of raw materials and resources, oil being our biggest one. Saudi Arabia was second, closely followed third by the Russians. Fourth was Canada. Fifth was China. By the way, that doesn't matter for China. I'll explain in a little bit. Sixth is Iran. Seventh is Iraq, and then eighth is Brazil. Those are the 8 largest oil manufacturers in the world, and Venezuela doesn't even get close to touching the top 8. It is actually insanely small in terms of its oil production ability. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can try and find it here on any other graphs. This one's actually from 2023. And we can once again see that Venezuela actually doesn't even pop up in the top 10. They're actually in the other 22.8% of global millions of barrels of oil production per day, and they don't even really measure up as a top 10 country. A lot of countries out there
Well,
do.
Well, that's just production right there. That's just the production of it. The claim is, and there appears to be actual valid evidence to back this claim up, is there's a lot of untapped oil reserves in Venezuela that it's not been produced, it's not been drilled yet, and apparently the Chinese are trying to drill it, and that's why you're seeing that platform being deployed in the lake near Venezuela, is because the Chinese have found one of these deposits that's untapped and they're trying to tap into it. So the reserves is the big deal, and the reserves really aren't being charted right now. They're not really charted on any public information that I've seen, but the big rumor is, and it appears to be evidence to probably back this up, is that there is a very large oil reserve that has been found, and that's why all of a sudden China's interested.
That most likely is the case, but at the same time, for a lot of people who were saying it is the oil, if we ended up going down there and conducting a military operation to depose Maduro, we would be in the same situation China would be in. The oil isn't flowing right now like it would be in a country like Kuwait or Iraq or elsewhere. The oil would have to still be drilled for, and we would have to find a way to extract the resources, meaning that this isn't a situation that deals with making sure that the spice must flow, to quote Dune. This more so is a direct response to Chinese containment and trying to stop the Chinese from further growing their abilities and tentacles further inside of South and Central America, much like we did earlier this year with Panama. So with that in mind, it generally appears that while the Chinese are trying to access the oil, this more so revolves around the idea of stopping further Chinese influence in South America rather than making sure that the existing oil is continuing to flow into American hands. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about the ongoing situation with the Venezuelans and what it might end up becoming. And a lot of people are talking about what they generally think will happen as a result of the situations that we're hearing of right now. I also want to make sure to cover a couple of other things that are somewhat important to point out before we get into that question. We have been able to hear that as of right now, heavy GPS jamming and interference is ongoing over most of the Caribbean, including parts of Venezuela, and we have also been able to hear statements from inside of Puerto Rico about the 10 F-35s that, according to a Republican representative of the Congress, a ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, the F-35 Lightning IIs that have been deployed to Puerto Rico as part of the building of military assets in the southern Caribbean and off the coast of Venezuela are the same F-35s that operated with the U.S. Air Force participating in Operation Midnight Hammer against Iran's nuclear facilities several months ago in June. This makes it incredibly clear, at least at this point, that these F-35s are actually well versed in conducting multi-role operations, and not only that, in combat conditions, conducting air-to-ground support operations. This once again leads more credence to the idea that these F-35s have been moved into the area to possibly conduct seed operations against Venezuelan radar systems with even higher amounts of efficacy than would be seen by other aircraft like the F-16CJ, and to also conduct ground strike operations generally with their stealth coating and stealth geometries of the fuselage, making them impervious to most types of ground fire. We have also been able to hear some additional details as well. This is more so a periphery thing, that the Brazilian Navy's Niterói class frigate and also the Royal Navy's Batch 2 River class patrol vessel is also inside of San Juan, Puerto Rico at the moment, although we're not really expecting that'll turn into much of anything. They just happen to be passing by. That's what we assume for now. And we've also been able to hear one last little update today about the boat, the narco boat that was hit, which you can see in this clip right here. Apparently, according to the statement that was made today, the drug-carrying vessel destroyed by the U.S. in the Caribbean had departed Monday night from San Juan de Lunare in the Sucre state and was already bound for Trinidad, well, allegedly bound for Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is right here. It's this little island country that exists right on the coast of Venezuela. So it appears that this little boat was conducting a shore skimming route, and it wasn't going for anywhere in the deep sea. So that would make a lot of sense, by the way. Sending a skiff like that out into the Caribbean, you are begging to die if a storm comes through, if you didn't know about that storm coming around. But nevertheless, it does appear that with all of this put together, all of this information, a lot of people are continuing to talk about what the future may hold inside the Caribbean, and also what the future may hold for possible U.S. actions against Venezuela. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So the big deal is right now we're seeing the heavy GPS jamming popping up all of a sudden, and the GPS jamming is believed to be conducted by the U.S. forces in the region, and that's likely because they're trying to protect our assets, which have recently been deployed near Venezuela. Of course, I'm not sure how many GPS-guided munitions Venezuela has, but the GPS jamming would prevent an attack on our F-35s and also prevent an attack on our ships when it comes to GPS-guided missiles, if they have any, which I'm not really sure if they do in Venezuela or not. But it's a good precaution. And also another thing. Airlines are canceling flights to the country of Venezuela. I think there's one or two airlines that have canceled flights for the entire month of September, which is usually a pretty good indication that a major escalation is coming very soon. So what is going to happen? And it looks like 46% said a strike campaign by the United States in 72 hours, while 19% said a strike campaign in 1 to 2 weeks, and 24% said the U.S. will do nothing, it's all posturing. And I would say, honestly, I believe a precision strike campaign is an extremely high likelihood at this point. I think that's getting close to almost a certainty in my personal opinion, but it's really crystal balling it on the time frame. We literally just showed up in the region. All of our ships, all of our aircraft, they just showed up. So I would say some staging operations are probably underway right now. And if there is going to be a strike campaign, which I think there will be, it'll probably be in 1 to 2 weeks. Not to quote the old saying there, but maybe 2 more weeks, we might see a strike campaign. I doubt it's going to happen in the next couple of days because, like I said, we literally just got there. But the GPS jamming indicates, though, that we are getting ready for something. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would also have to be in agreement that this is most likely going to happen in 1 to 2 weeks. Not to make the old famous saying, and that's not even be the sarcastic, that's quite literally what I would believe as well. I believe this is a few weeks away. I would have to be with the 19%. Because while a lot of people believe that the military operates at a lightning fast pace, having talked to a lot of people in the military and having a lot of people here from the military, I'm sure that y'all know of the famous phrase of hurry up and wait. And that's what happens at every single level in the military. Even the top brass at this sort of a strategic level that we're looking at right now, that we're all talking about on air, same thing's happening. Hurry up and waiting. Right now, the Amphibious Ready Group just got in the area. They're just conducting amphibious landing drills. And if they wanted to conduct a ground invasion inside of Venezuela at the most extreme instance of what they could do, they're still going to be a little ways away from doing that. They've got to make sure that this Marine Expeditionary Unit is up to speed. They have to make sure that the brigade commander understands what he's going to be doing, what his brigade's going to be doing. They then have to make sure that all the battalions know what they're going to be doing, what they're going to do once they make landfall, how they're going to spread out. All that has to be communicated to the battalion commanders, the brigade commander, the Southcom command. That has to be all coordinated from Southcom command down to every other unit in the area. They also have to coordinate with the Navy and the Air Force. And then on top of that, we're speaking even in a more limited role, not talking about a ground invasion supported with air support and also naval support, but just a strike campaign involving the Navy and the Air Force. That still is a very lengthy sort of a preparation that we would have to undergo. These operations don't happen instantaneously. They usually take a little bit of time to prepare before they're even able to be executed. So right now what we have in the area is a screening force that could defend any buildup of U.S. forces that is happening, but it's certainly not an attack force. And I would have to say that we're still a good bit of ways away from seeing that strikes would begin or that we would conduct any sort of an attempted invasion inside of Venezuela. And I'll also be honest with y'all, I would just like to say this as a bit of a disclaimer, so because I think some people misunderstand. Enforcer Matt and me are not really big fans of this operation at the moment. There are a lot of things going on in the world, and while I'm generally a huge fan of going up against America's adversaries aggressively, either diplomatically or in a militaristic sense, at the same time, we always have to make sure to keep conservation of our resources and also make sure that we pick our fights well. This isn't really a fight that we necessarily have to fight right now. We could fight this later, or we could leave this alone until we want to deal with it at some other point. We could even make this a covert operation, where this is more so dealt with by America's intelligence agencies than it is by the military directly. We are looking at an impending war in Eastern Europe, and we're also looking at a possible war in the Indo-Pacific right now. Both of those are going to be manpower and resource consumptive to the absolute extreme. And while we can fight a two-front war, I don't really think it's the greatest idea, at least for now, to be able to try and conduct this operation. But like I've always said on this channel as well, and this is where the other side of the analysis comes in, if a plan is executed well, there is no such thing as a bad plan or a bad policy. That's on the domestic political level, and that's also on the foreign policy level, in my honest opinion. Anyone can come up with any idea, and it might seem like a stupid idea, but if they execute it well, it will go swimmingly. So the military technically could conduct this operation, and this could go amazingly. Maduro's government could collapse, the whole military could collapse, there's practically no resistance, a new government is formed because Maduro's wildly unpopular, and the US military leaves, quite literally, almost immediately, and there's hardly anyone left there except for maybe a brigade or two of Marines that conduct security and help support the new interim government. It could also go the opposite way, where it goes really badly, where we could see that armed resistance continues to occur inside of the Amazon and other sparsely populated areas of Venezuela, and possibly even within the urban areas as well. Maybe, at some extent, we could see that there would be heavy resistance against a U.S. occupation and the arising of a new interim government, and that could tie up U.S. forces there for an incredibly long period of time, quite similar to that of Iraq or Afghanistan. So generally, while we are looking at the situation right now and saying that it could turn out, well, it's really not the best idea to pull off, there is some ways that this could turn out great and turn out terribly if they decide to press forward with a ground invasion or an air campaign. The air campaign might even turn out...
Something else is kind of interesting as well is usually in South America, and the United States is notorious for doing this. The CIA operates heavily in South America, and whenever we've had a problem with a South American nation, we are very quick to start subversion operations, sort of behind closed doors and in secret, to try to oust or create a revolution to get rid of these dictators. We've usually done that in the past, and we've been semi-successful in the past with it. It's at least created destabilization in these countries and severely weakens them when it's been conducted. But this time, though, instead of using, I guess you could say, the more strategic approach, we're using a ball-peen hammer on this one for some reason. So I'm not sure why the military is having to take a direct action against Venezuela this time, considering that in the past we have used subversion operations to go in and take care of these issues. So I don't know. Like, it seems to me like it's a little bit overboard, I would say. I'm still going to stick to this. An invasion of Venezuela would be a mistake. It would be a big mistake. I'm going to stand by that one completely. Precision strikes would not be a mistake. They could do that generally without much collateral cost to the United States. But what is the end goal, though? That's the big question. Are they going to try to strike, like, for example, government sites to overthrow the Maduro regime? Are they going to possibly go in and try to take out some of the government leaders? We do not know right now. The U.S. really doesn't seem to know either, at least in my personal opinion. There's really no public plan to this, and obviously they want to keep something secret for OPSEC reasons, but there's really no public even inclination of a plan right now. So it looks like pure posturing, but we've sent so much stuff, so many assets down there to the region, it seems nearly impossible that we wouldn't do something to Venezuela. But at the same time, though, it's like, where's the plan? Like, I don't even really foresee what the plan would be right now at this point.
I would have to be honest really quickly, because I see a lot of people are like, this for some reason is a little bit polarizing for folks. People are very strongly opinionated on it, and I'll just be honest, it's because it's somehow turned into a political thing, like everything does these days, where, like, just to be completely honest with y'all, like, from what I'm seeing, the Republicans are all for it and the Democrats act like it's the worst thing on the planet. So, we're kind of working in that environment now, and it's a little bit odd, because I thought that the people who were for, like, the people right now who are for this war, I thought they were against any wars at all, and then the people who were against it, I thought that they were for facing down our adversaries. So it doesn't really make any sense at the moment as usual. But to explain the situation that's going on down here, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea or a good idea, but I do have a lot of concerns about how this is going to be executed, to be entirely honest. If this was executed amazingly and with a great deal of understanding of how this would turn out, then this could go out well, and we can end up wrapping this thing up quickly and getting ready for what's going on in the Indo-Pacific and Europe. But
yeah, but when you say wrap it up, like, wrap up what? Like what do you, when you say you're going to wrap it up, what is the operation they're trying to wrap up?
So to create a new interim government, depose Maduro, make sure the interim government is American aligned, and leave. That's pretty much all that we would be trying to do, at least in my opinion.
Now, you really can't do that through precision strikes, because precision strikes may be able to target some government officials, if that's what the U.S. is trying to go for, but you're not going to overthrow a government with missiles. That's not possible. So to do that, you'd really have to be on the ground, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I would. It's something that would have to be done on the ground. But at the same time, though, if that was what they're going for, and with the 22nd MEU conducting amphibious landing drills in Puerto Rico, it's highly likely that's where they're heading with us eventually. That would generally be the plan: is to depose the Maduro government and then set up an interim government that would be American aligned instead of Chinese aligned like the current government, and then leave. That generally would probably be the objective because it seems to be a greater overarching Chinese containment policy that this may be attached to. But at the same time, I've got to be honest with y'all, with how Operation Midnight Hammer was conducted, I'm not really that confident that this could be conducted well. Operation Midnight Hammer would have gone amazingly well if it had been a multi-week long airstrike campaign. We would have achieved our objectives entirely. We did not achieve really a lot through that strike. We did knock out some key facilities, but we've now been hearing over the months since then that it doesn't really appear that any of our primary objectives, like the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program or the destruction of the enriched uranium, was achieved. And there was an absolute refusal, even still for the large part, to continue the airstrikes and create a prolonged campaign to ensure success of the operation. And considering that the current administration seems to prioritize cheap, quick grabs at victories and not really long-lasting solutions, just to be completely frank with you all, this is what makes me concerned that the Venezuelan operation could go poorly. Because if we try and conduct it as something quick and swift, like a 15-minute in and out adventure, this could end up going poorly, and we could actually see that the situation becomes worse, or that we don't achieve any of our objectives, and this may culminate in some sort of a pseudo defeat of a sort.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing I can really see right now, here's my concept of a plan, as they say, that I think is going to be happening here. And once again, this is only my speculation. I'm not sure if this is the way it's going to go or not. I think the U.S. is going to conduct precision strikes on actual legitimate narco-terrorist targets, because obviously there is a very large narco network operating in Venezuela. There's multiple different cartels which are distributing drugs to the United States from Venezuela, and I think the U.S. will strike those targets, which would be legitimate targets in my opinion, because of course they are poisoning our country with drugs. That's a known fact. So we'll probably strike that, and we'll hope that that will send such a strong message to the Maduro regime that he starts freaking out, and it has a psychological effect on his regime, and maybe he'll be more pliable to U.S. demands. That's the only real plan I could really see here, because I really don't see how striking the Maduro regime with missiles is going to really solve anything, because you can't overthrow him doing that. Missiles alone are probably going to actually embolden his regime, because then they're going to be rallied. Their government officials will have been attacked at that point, and the people are going to rally around them, most likely, in my opinion. That never really works out. So,
and especially if there's civilian collateral.
Yeah, if there's civilian collateral, that's going to wire people up even worse. I'll tell you all this. This has the indications of being a potential disaster if this is not done properly. And you know, when plans are not very clear like this, and also nobody's really being very vocal about what our general idea of a plan is, that concerns me a lot. Like, they don't have to tell us all the operational details. That is an OPSEC thing that they got to keep secret, but nobody's even telling us the overall, like, big picture, and that seems to be a little bit concerning to me.
I will tell y'all this, folks. Right now, with how this is going, how this is set up, I'm not really a big fan of it. But I will tell y'all something. If this was said, then I would end up becoming a not really a fan, but I would be in support of this. So let me explain what I would say you should be looking for if we were looking for something that would work. The objective needs to be to make it incredibly clear to the public that Maduro is a Chinese-aligned leader heading a Chinese-aligned or Axis-sphere government. This is a direct threat to the United States due to its proximity in the Americas. For that reason, we need to deal with it. What we are going to do is we are going to go in and conduct a limited ground operation to depose the Maduro government and to install an interim government. After about 6 months to a year of a certain level of U.S. occupation of most of the major cities along the coastline, once the interim government appears to be stable enough, we are going to pack up and we are going to leave, and we are only going to leave behind possibly 1 or 2 Marine expeditionary units to pretty much operate as a peacekeeping force and a liaison for the new interim government, and to provide some security support and training to the new Venezuelan military. That should be it. That is a clear entry and exit plan. It lays out clear objectives, and it makes it something that is followable on a foreign policy level, and it is an overarching anti-Chinese containment policy, which once again is fairly beneficial for the United States on a greater strategic picture.
Yeah, maybe so. I just don't know, man. I'm getting a little bit shaky here. I'm kind of shaking a little bit about this one because I'm like, if this goes poorly, here's the risk if it goes poorly. The United States looks weak, like on a military sense, if this goes poorly. It looks like a failure on the global stage at a time that we really can't afford. Because right now we need to be projecting military strength. We also need to be projecting diplomatic strength as well. We've not done a good job on the diplomatic side of things. I'll be perfectly honest with that. So we don't want to do it on the military side of things as well, because right now the world still believes and also fully sees the U.S. as a strong military. We don't want to go to Venezuela and have a public embarrassment, and then have the world, like for example, China and Russia, believe, oh, well, they're just like a big pushover now. They're not only diplomatically weak, but they're also militarily weak as well, and that might embolden them to actually act quicker and start World War III. So I mean, that's a huge concern.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of risks here. There's a decent amount of rewards if it was done incredibly well, but there's also a lot of risks if it's just done in mediocrity or poorly. So hopefully we'll see the whatever. Like, just to be honest with y'all, as long as it's done the right way, or we make the right call, even if we don't decide to do this and we end up doing that in a smart way, as long as it's a smart move either way, whether we do this or not, then I'm going to be fine with it. But if it's done poorly and incompetently, this could end up backfiring on us pretty badly. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. And before we move on into the rest of the news for the night, also, by the way, just a little bonus point in news before we move on. The Ecuadorian president did openly support today. Daniel Noboa, who is the president of Ecuador, stated that he openly supports the idea of a U.S. base being built and operated inside of Ecuador, and said that it must be approved in a referendum, however, by the citizenry. So we will have to see how that goes. But that generally is all of our news from the Caribbean. So before we move on into the rest of our news in East Asia, the Middle East, Ukraine, and also some updates from Washington, I do want to make sure we get a couple of questions from the chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat questions of the night, our first one goes to none other than Bobby43. And thank you very much, Bobby, for that $200 support. And we appreciate that very, very much. And of course, that is LC39A, by the way. He changed his name to Bobby, so we do have the first name. And we appreciate it very much, Bobby, for that extremely generous support. He said, have a safe trip.
And I gotta thank you for the incredible support, Bobby43. And I will hopefully have a safe trip, I hope. And I gotta thank you for the incredibly massive support because, folks, just to let you all know, this is not going to be the last stream forever, but this will be the last stream for a little bit until the 11th of September. Because I will be gone and away on business, trying to find Enforcer HQ 3.0. We staggered the trips so that way we could try and keep the show and channel for a larger part running as continuously as we possibly could, instead of just, knocking it out for a whole week and nothing's being uploaded. So I will now be gone away trying to find Enforcer HQ 3.0, and then I will be back on the 11th, and we will be running streams immediately on my return on the 11th. So I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and thank you so much for wishing a safe trip. Hopefully it'll be an incredibly safe one, and an incredibly enlightening one, an educational one, to figure out where this HQ is going to be. So a huge, massive thanks to you so much once again, Bobby43, for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Merlin, and Merlin throws in a $200 donation as well. And thank you very much, Merlin, for that extremely generous support, by the way. We do appreciate that. That kind of support right there literally helps keep the channel running. And Merlin said, first super chat, and the streams are my nightly white noise. And is World War III imminent or years away?
And I got to thank you for the support, Merlin. And it's great to hear that we're white noise. Listen to that. We're white noise, Matthew. That is a high honor right there for people to turn us on as white noise. We're apparently pleasant enough to be considered background noise, which is a very high praise, I have to say. Because you could be listening.
That mean noise, by the way? Like we're speaking about some heavy topics here. Like we're talking about potentially World War III, new wars in South America. We're talking about some heavy stuff right here. If this is white noise for you, Merlin, I think you might be pretty hardcore.
For some people, this will be considered major news. For Merlin, it's another Tuesday. but beyond that, I gotta say a huge thanks to you so much for the kind words. And also, I would have to say, Merlin, this is, I don't like to say it because it sounds like fear-mongering, but with the current track of things, with how everything is going in the world right now, and multiple different foreign policy and diplomatic fronts, if everything keeps going the way it's going, a world war is going to break out somehow, some way. We have never wanted to say that for years. As a matter of fact, I actually generally made it a rule off air that when we're on air, we would downplay the possibility of anything turning into a greater war, because generally, while a lot of people like to fearmonger that sort of thing and have been for years to get clicks and views, it just didn't really look like it was going to happen for the past 3.5 years, and it seemed like a very far and unlikely certainty. But nowadays, it's starting to rise. There's just so many different types of escalations that are happening, and it's clear that a lot of others sorts of things are going to be coming to a head, like a possible war in Europe, or China invading Taiwan, which we generally would consider would possibly start a third world war, or at least a contained war within the Pacific, which would be one of the largest of the century at this point. And also another war between Israel and Iran to denuclearize them. There are so many different things that could come to a head at this point that could involve multiple major nations around the world getting involved, that in one way or another, in all of these scenarios, there is a decent chance at this point that a world war could break out. Probably within the next 3 years. I would say, though, that I have to extend it into the next 5 years. Most likely by 2030, a major war will have happened, because it's nothing is dying down. And I also want to say that as well. It could all die down, but on the current track that we're at right now, with how things keep escalating, if nothing de-escalates and it just continues to escalate like it has been, we are on the path to war right now. There really is no other way that this could go. And before a lot of people say, well, we need to de-escalate, there is also a little bit of a nuance to that as well. We can only de-escalate as much as others want to. If we want to de-escalate to the point of appeasement, then we're pretty much just guaranteeing to put ourselves up a creek without a paddle, and World War III will start anyways, because that's how it always worked in the past. World War II is a great example. So generally, even if we wanted to avoid the war, it's really not up to us whether we would want to or not. It's really up to the Chinese and the Russians if they want to avoid a world war, because we could appease them as much as we want, or we could face them down and threaten to obliterate them as a nation up front, and the war could start either way. It really just depends on their aptitude or veracity to actually get into a conflict like that. So I would generally say if nothing changes at the moment, and there is no de-escalation, and it continues on the way it is, a major war or a world war is probably going to happen within the next 5 years. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And humongous thanks to you so much for the support, Merlin, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running, and hopefully we wouldn't be able to give good analysis and answers like we've been giving throughout the course of the night so far. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, so this one goes to Hokey Redneck, and thank you very much, Hokey, for that $100 support right there, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Hokey said, I'll pay my people, don't like me tax.
And I thank you massively for the support, Hokey Reddick, all the way from Washington, D.C. And I got to thank you incredibly for helping this channel to keep running. I got to say, nobody likes taxes, but we have to pay them. It is a civic duty. It's a part of our social contract with the government. We give them taxes, and they build a nice military. It looks good, like in the pictures. You look at that and you go, wow, that's where the money's going. And I mean, hell, it's a great reason to not have free healthcare. I could tell you that. I mean, the Europeans, they might have, I don't know, nice cities and high-speed trains and free healthcare, but do they have 11 aircraft carriers? No, no, they don't. I'm just playing, by the way. But beyond that, humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Hokey Redneck, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing a reality and keep it rolling. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news. Also, I saw someone say, voluntary tax compliance. Now, I know a lot of people hate taxes, but really quickly, I have to explain this. When America was first founded, after the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which recognized us as an actual nation, and the British left the colonies as a fighting force, during those first years, up until 1787, for those 5 years, there practically were no taxes. Like, there were next to none, literally non-existent for the larger part. And then everyone started to find out, oh shit, we can't do anything without money. So then in the Constitutional Convention, they fixed that. And then they said, okay, now everyone can start raising taxes. And the Congress can also raise taxes as well. And there was a lot of pushback to that, even still. You can look at the Whiskey Rebellion, which was a tax on, I believe it was sugar that was used to produce whiskey, but it was generally a tax on whiskey. You can look at the Whiskey Rebellion to already see that people didn't really like taxes, but then George Washington himself, the president of the United States at the time, donned on his Continental Army uniform, raised an army, and then went right up into Pennsylvania to put it down. So from then on, taxes are just kind of part of the system. Everyone doesn't like them, that I can agree, but everyone has to pay them because it's what keeps up national defense, national infrastructure, and a whole bunch of other myriad of things that you really don't see or deal with every day, but are vital to the nation's continued operation. But with that, I hope that does address that well. It's kind of like a bonus rabbit hole there at the end. Taxes are not great, at least paying them, but they do provide us with certain services from the government. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news. But before we move on into that rest of the news, a lot of people are still talking about that Venezuela stuff. And why in the world is China installing its first oil rig in Venezuela? Is this the real reason for the tensions, or is it something deeper? And Matthew, what are people saying about that, and what are you thinking about it?
All right. So, what is the real reason, the real primary reason for tensions between the United States and Venezuela? Because people are pretty much all over the board with this one. So, it looks like 45% of the audience said it's more about Chinese influence than anything else, while 24% said it's really about narco terrorism, and another 24% said it's really about the oil reserves, and we want that precious oil in the ground. So, I'm not really buying the narco terrorism thing, folks, because here's the thing. Colombia has a lot of narco terrorism. So does Mexico. There are so many South American countries that have cartels operating in them. Why are we singling out Venezuela? That doesn't make sense logically on its face. So I really doubt the narco terrorism explanation. That really doesn't make much sense. Also, the oil reserve thing, it doesn't make much sense either, because we have plenty of oil here in the United States. We don't need the actual oil itself. It would be great to have it if we could have it, but it's not something that we need to go die over, basically. So it's not really about that. It could be a primary or a secondary prize to the thing, I guess you could say. But I would say it's about Chinese influence. If there's any real reason behind it, it would be about that. And now that China's installed its first oil rig in Venezuela, even though we don't need the oil, we don't want China to have the oil. And also, we don't want them to grow their influence over Venezuela any further, because they're very close to the United States, and Venezuela could be a basing point for the Chinese, which would be a huge national security threat to the United States. So I would say definitely it's about Chinese influence. I'm not really sure why the United States is not simply saying that. It would make more sense to say that, and also it'd be a lot more transparent with the American people to simply just say it the way it is. So maybe they think that's going to scare people or something if they admit that, but I would say just say it outright. I'm with the 44%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would have to be with the 44% as well. It is all about Chinese influence. And I'm wanting to find this really quickly and show it to all of y'all, just the list of wars from the 20th century. And let me show y'all something really quickly. So, let me count them. The Little Race War, or the part of the Banana Wars as a whole, in Central America against Cuba. Then moving on from that, we also were in Nicaragua from 1912 to 1933, also a part of the Banana Wars. The Banana Republics and all that come from that war. The United States occupation of Veracruz in Mexico, once again, Central American involvement, armed involvement, mind you all. We also have the United States occupation of Haiti. This is a whole other thing, like that's a deep rabbit hole. The United States occupation of the Dominican Republic. All this happened, by the way, before World War I. All these instances of us being in Central America, all those happened from about 1900 to about 1916. Now let's pass over World War I. So then we move on into the period after the First World War. So this is the interwar period. So let's count all of the times that we were inside of Central America again. None. So let's move on past World War II, and let's see when we went back into Central America. So let's see here. Yes, we're getting down close to it. Let's see, Vietnam War, let's see, Second Taiwan Strait crisis, Tibetan Laotian Civil War, the Guatemalan Civil War. Once again, we are back in Central America. Bay of Pigs invasion, once again, back in Central America. Everyone knows that one. That's a time and true classic favorite of most of America. Everybody knows of the Bay of Pigs. We also have the Cuban Missile Crisis, once again, in Central America, countering Soviet influence, by the way. But also notice this, folks. Every single conflict that we've talked about so far in the area, not that I've covered this well so far going through the list, every single one of them had to do with curbing some sort of foreign influence, either Spanish influence at the very beginning of the 20th century, but by this point that we're talking about right here, it's curbing Soviet influence in Central and South America. So now let's move on beyond this. Now we are moving on into another Dominican Civil War, once again to try and make sure that communist forces do not end up running the Republic of, the Dominican Republic. Moving on from that, then we get involved in a guerrilla campaign in Bolivia against the Cubans. And also the CIA was involved. Yay, that's fun. Big thanks, Alan Dulles, a really cool guy. Also, we have the Contra War. Everybody knows the Contra War, but once again, heavy involvement inside of Central and South America. Then we had the Salvadoran Civil War. We were also involved there. Once again, against Soviet influence. See right here. Supported by the Soviet Union, Cuba, Ethiopia, which is kind of an odd one, and Nicaragua. Then we got involved in, let me make sure that I get this correct. Let's see here. I need to make sure to find the next one here. The United States invasion of Grenada, which once again is in the area and is curbing Soviet influence. So notice, just going off of this myriad of millions of examples that we have from the list of wars the U.S. was involved in the 20th century, a lot of them are against foreign influence reaching the Americas. Every single one of them is. If you look at them all and the reasoning for it, we are always fighting someone in the area that was either Soviet aligned, Spanish aligned, or some sort of a foreign power that was significant within the area. Nowadays, the problem is China, because China is trying to expand their influence in South and Central America, and that's why we're starting to get a lot more aggressive against these countries. So this is 100% based off of the historic precedent of any reason why we get involved in Central and South America. It is to curb foreign influence. This time, it's the Chinese, not the Soviets or the Spanish. So with that,
I remember Panama. Panama was the last issue. Somehow Panama worked itself out, actually. I think the company that was Chinese aligned either backed out or was pushed out by the Panamanian government to leave the canal alone, I believe. I think the U.S. has some type of deal with the Panamanians now, if I'm correct, to actually keep control of the canal completely. If I'm not mistaken. Am I right on that, though? What was the end result?
The end result is that U.S. warships get priority and pass for free, and also, also the Panamanians started to kind of expel Chinese companies from Panama, which is causing economic issues of their own. But that's really a side point for them. But they're trying to make sure to remove most Chinese influence, or at least direct influence that could sway the government's decision making.
Yeah, remember there was a whole thing going on 2 months, 3 months ago where we were about to invade Panama to go take the canal back. Y'all might remember that. There's been so much crazy stuff happening. That's kind of slipped people's minds a little bit, but that was just about to occur. That seems to have gone off the table. But the difference is, though, between the Panama situation with the canal and also the Venezuela situation, we didn't deploy major assets to Panama. We never got to that point. It pretty much died off before it got to that. But with the Venezuela situation, though, it's like we skipped diplomacy and we jumped straight to potential military action for some reason. So that's why I would say it's something much deeper than just meets the eye, because Panama was much more strategically important than Venezuela will ever be.
Yeah, it's a fairly strategically important strait, the Panama Strait is, but also I see a lot of people talking about damn, Enforcer, I didn't even know that. And that's something that I've kind of been going up against recently, is that a lot of I don't say this in a condescending way, but I say this in an honest way. A lot of people do not know the in-depth details of American history or American military involvement, and a lot of people have no clue that America is pretty much in Central America endlessly 24/7 historically doing something down there, especially since the end of the 1880s and the 1890s. We were practically down there endlessly doing something somewhere. And so with the Venezuelan thing, that's why I'm saying, folks, I'm not really against it, at least if it was done well, because other developments in Central America were done well and they ended up turning out pretty decently. Others were done poorly and we're still reaping the consequences of that to this day. The cartels are a direct example of that, especially the Contras, which pretty much melded into what the cartels are nowadays and have become a huge issue. That's what we're dealing with right now. If this is done well, this is nothing new for us, and we could end up coming out of this just fine and in an even better position. If it's done poorly, then we end up creating a monster like the Contras, which turn into the cartels of the future. So it really depends. That's why I'm not heavily for this or against it. I'm just against it if it's done poorly, but I'm for it if it's done well, or if we make the right decision. If we think that we can't do it well, then we just back off and choose other fish to fry in the meantime, which are more so a priority. I hope that does address that well and also give a little bit of historical context to American involvement in the Americas, or really the Caribbean. But moving on out of that and on into the rest of the news. Also, I see someone saying we were dumb as hell. No, that's not it. It's just that a lot of people don't spend their time researching and learning history. Like, I think it's a big issue, though, because a lot of people learn, like, romanticized history. A lot of people don't learn, like, the real history of, like, what we do. And it's not a bad thing. It's just what we do. But a lot of people don't learn it. So a lot of people don't know that we're always in Central America, and we're always doing something down there. We're deposing someone, creating a new government, invading someone, taking something, giving someone something. It's always one thing or another, and a lot of people really don't know that. And it creates issues because a lot of people have like this modern concept of, oh, we don't do anything down there. Why are we doing this now? And it's like, well, we are always down there and doing something. It's just people don't remember or know that we were doing anything down there. But anyways, moving on from that and into Washington for a brief moment to cover some updates up here. We were hearing today that apparently the president issued a letter to the Congress that appears to be saying something along the lines of, please try and support my war. So in a letter to Congress, the president said, it is not possible at this time to know the full scope and duration of military operations that will be necessary. United States forces remain postured to carry out further military operations. This generally is a statement which came from this letter here from the president that is generally stating that we don't really know what we're wanting to do yet, but it could result in literally anything from someone getting their toe stubbed to us invading the whole country. So I'm kind of looking for y'all to support whatever action's taken. Which generally, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew, this is something very akin to the kind of presidential war powers that would be given, to where an official declaration of war isn't given, but we would understand that he's pretty much free to do whatever he would like.
Well, yeah, actually, to explain this, what this is right here is this is a notification letter that the president has to send to Congress, or at least he's supposed to send it to Congress, which he did. So he complied with the law, which is the War Powers Resolution of 1973. He has to notify Congress within 48 hours of sending U.S. armed forces into hostilities or situations of imminent conflict with a foreign nation. So this is a little bit telling because this right here indicates that conflict is imminent. That's why you would send this letter to Congress, is because the president believes that a conflict will be imminent, if I can speak clearly. But that is what that indicates right here. So what he has to do beyond this point, according to the War Powers Resolution, is he has to withdraw the forces within 60 to 90 days unless Congress authorizes their continued presence. So if he could start the war technically, and the past U.S. presidents have done this all the time, they'll start a war by deploying these forces, which they do have the legal ability to do. They can deploy forces, conduct limited strikes, but they have to seek congressional approval in about 2 to 3 months. If Congress says no, he's got to pull the forces back out. But here's the catch, though. If we're already too deeply entrenched, then Congress will have to say yes, or otherwise we're going to be literally pulling out of a conflict that we literally just started, which would not be good for the United States. So this is the loophole right here. Presidents can start wars without congressional approval. This is not the first president to potentially do it, and he won't be the last. I can guarantee you that.
I would have to agree. Also, before people start making an issue of this has been done since World War II. Every single conflict we've ever been involved in since World War II, there's never been an official declaration of war. So this is the process that has been done for about 80 years. So this isn't anything new. Before people try and turn it into something new, this has been going on for quite a while. But beyond that, we will have to see what the Congress is going to say to this, because if they support it, then this means he's got free reign to do whatever he would like, which also includes an invasion of Venezuela if he deemed that necessary. So we'll have to see what comes out of that here in the future. But moving on from that and on into Europe, it is now time for us to cover all of the major news that's been coming out of actually East Asia, the Middle East, and also Ukraine, because I just realized we're starting to run way behind on the news. We've pretty much been in Northern Europe and Central America the whole show. So moving on from that, just to quickly breeze through East Asia and the Middle East, a statement from the PLA's Eastern Theater Command has confirmed the report about a Taiwan strait transit undertaken by the Canadian and Australian navies, and the PLA condemned the transit, saying it increased security risks and sent a wrong signal. That is the statement right here in Mandarin. Moving on from that and on into the Middle East, we also were able to hear that fiber optic lines inside of the seabed of the Red Sea have apparently been severed and cut. Around 70% of internet traffic between Asia and Europe goes through the Red Sea, and it's one of the main weapons that the Houthis have, and it appears that they may be using it at the moment. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the Iraqi government was conducting counterterrorism raids inside of northern Iraq. You can see that in this clip right here.
Oh,
God!
Oh no! That's definitely not a silent hawk.
Man, that's that loud hog. They be flying that loud. But anyways, we also got to see that apparently some sort of an explosion happened in western Tehran. I can't show you all the clip. It's a little graphic. But we also were able to hear that apparently the Islamic Republic of Iran will be voting on whether to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty on Sunday. This is a treaty that pretty much states that pinky promise the Iranians will never make a nuclear weapon. So they're not going to be voting on whether they're going to withdraw from that, which may as well be a clear, surefire statement they're developing a nuclear weapon. What more could there be done for the people who do not believe that shows that they are making a nuclear weapon? They're literally symbolically withdrawing themselves from the treaty that says we won't create a nuclear weapon. That may as well be a blatant admission they're still working on one, and they will be working on one until they get one. Like, I don't know why some people have to be convinced on that excessively. The proof is right there. It's literally right there. And if they vote to withdraw themselves from the non-proliferation treaty, it technically changes nothing, except for the symbolic fact they are making it incredibly clear they are making a nuclear weapon. But moving on from that.
And I was like, BB, I'm going to rip up my nuclear sheet paper and we're going to build the army and we're going to build the nukes and you better not blow up my nuclear shit. But it turns out that BB is going to be back yet again. I have a feeling BB is going to be doing a U-turn and coming back to Tehran.
Man, truer words have never been spoken. But moving on from that and on up into the area of the Russian Federation, we have also been able to hear that apparently there's now a crisis evolving in the steel industries in the Russian Federation. I would go into deeper detail on this, but we are starting to run overtime on our news segment. So just take it at face value. If you would like to read more about it, Anti Gerashenko on Twitter wrote a great deal about it, a short essay, and you can click on the link in the description below to go to our map, click on this link in Moscow, and then it'll take you straight to the news source. We have also been able to hear that there is still panic going on at the pumps near Moscow. Take a look at this.
Oh, man. All brakes, no gas. Look at this.
Man.
Oh.
Bro, are you like lifting weights right there?
Man, I tell you what, I was looking at this and it caused a pain in my gut. I was like, oh, I think it's the big one. I think it's look at that. There's a recruitment poster right there above them. Look. Gas, and you can go fly on the front and die for the Putin crazy man. How about that? So when you get tired of waiting in the gas line and you're out of money and broke, you can go sign up for the military and go be thrown into the meat grinder.
And look, here's another billboard for just Russia. I guess it's advertising the very country they live in. That's really good. But look at that, folks. The absolute dichotomy of Russia. Fight for the glory of your nation while they're ungloriously sitting at the gas pumps waiting for gas. Wow, incredible.
What honestly a shit existence, I'll be honest with you. Russia is a hellhole.
Russia is what they call the shit. but the shit hole. But moving on from that, and on into the rest of our news, we have also been able to hear in the Bryansk area that there's been some strikes the Ukrainian drones conducted on a Bryansk railway station. Oh, well, there it was. They also hit.
Why is there a fox in this?
I don't know, but you know what the fox says?
I said, kaboom.
Man, that fox says, suka, blia. But anyways, moving on from that, and down into Onetsha, they also hit the pumping station again. They can't.
Oh no, Hungary's gonna ban Magyar a third time.
Dude, Orban's gonna come out. We have to protect the girls from more strikes on the gas pipeline. Like, we're banning Magyar for the third time.
Magyar's gonna come out. You dumb bastard. I was gonna tap this quarantine on your head.
People do not like you. You are weak. Ukraine is not weak. but anyways. Man. Bleed. Let's skip forward to the actual. There we go. You hear that? That's the explosion. The rest of the clip is pitch black, so we're just going to fast forward through that and get on to more interesting clips and news. Moving on into Kyiv, we were also able to hear that according to Zelensky today, Ukraine has reached a share of domestically produced weapons of almost 60%, meaning that all the weapons used in Ukraine right now, 6 out of 10 of them are actually made in Ukraine. So that is actually very interesting here. It sounds like they're starting to become very self-reliant in terms of war industry and continuing to fight this war. Moving on out of that, we also were able to see that a major drone attack was conducted by the Ukrainians today throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation, including the occupied territories and others. And we were able to see that some Russians took it upon themselves themselves to conduct the great patriotic act of whipping out the Draco and that Blicky and trying to blast out a drone or two out of the sky. Take a gander.
Не видно.
There he is, Bliat! Get him, Vadim!
Oh no, he's got that switch.
Есть попадание, падает, падает.
Yes, Papa, yes.
Присели.
What did he just
Oh,
say?
they actually got it with the Draco.
Oh damn, Papa hit it with the Draco. I can't believe that. This is a rare sight.
Dude, I got to be honest with y'all. When this thing opened fire, it sounded like the most cartoonish Mac 10 style gun I've ever heard. Like, the fire rate on this thing was insane.
Man, the Dracos, I tell you what, notoriously bad for aiming, but they somehow hit it.
Dude, let's listen to what he said. I'll make sure to translate this. Of course, folks, I can understand Russian.
Есть попадание, падает.
He said, "Yes, Papa, I pissed the chair." Like, it's just like crashing.
Присели.
And there we go. They did end up managing to take down one. Outside of that, it doesn't really appear that there's been a lot of good things going on in Russia, as we were able to hear that a carpet plan, which is pretty much a grounding of all flights around Volgograd, was conducted, as it does appear that the Lukoil refinery in the area is under attack again. So apparently they weren't able to take out enough of them. A little unfortunate with that. But anyways, moving on from that, and on to the rest of the news that we have from inside of Ukraine, we also were able to see the Russian casualty report, and it was spicy. Oh,
they got one Bobcat right there. Look at that. They had to give me one. They got to keep me strung out a little bit there. They just feed me a little bit. They say, here, have one. There's one to keep you going. But I love it though. I love it right there. I'm just hooked on those Bobcats. I tell you what. But tell us more.
And, of course, Miss Decent Keeper of the Records has stated that today is the highest personnel loss of Russian forces since the 1,010 that were lost on the 16th of August this year. 256 drones is the 19th highest daily loss of the war, and also one Bobcat skid steer for Enforcer Matt. And we were able to see that over the past 24 hours, 960 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 119 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 39 artillery pieces, 256 drones, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. All in all, it was actually a pretty damn good day. Moving on from that and down to the Torsk area, we also get to see them destroying Russian positions in the Liman and Torsk area. Take a look at the 3rd Brigade, the Tritsa Brigada. Get the tank, boy.
Look at this fishnet, Bliat. It's so good for the taking away the drones so it doesn't hit the armor.
Is that Lukashenko?
Lukashenko.
You see, I always have to talk like I'm constipated because I am.
Well, if you were full of shit, wouldn't you talk like this too?
Yeah, только да.
Bro, that's literally how he sounds. Oh, man. Though you can see
I
that
think Belarus had to make sure that we have enough soldiers to be able to protect the place. I'm turning into British aristocrats while I'm talking about him.
My father drives a Rolls Royce. My father drives a honky. That's a Chinese car, by the way, before anyone misquotes that.
Oh, man. The irony. The irony.
Oh, man. Anyway, so we also got to see this Ukrainian drone from the 118th Territorial Defense Brigade fly itself down the barrel of a Russian Rapira. Rapira, by the way, is an antiquated anti-tank gun. These have actually been used by both sides, and the Ukrainians famously created the MT-12 Rapira, which is what we call the MTLB that's been outfitted with a Rapira. But we can see it hitting right on the barrel.
Y'all know there's actually an executive Chinese sedan, which only the party leadership can usually drive in China. It's called a Hanqi. It's a big car, very, very heavy, big engine, talking about a V12, and it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And you have to have the commie flag. Whoa. Well, hold on a minute. Wait, did they add this meme to the end of this? What the hell?
Nice. Like, it's that meme. It's no way.
It's him.
It's him.
He's definitely British.
Bro, he's 100% Himalayan. But moving on from that and on down the line and into the Pokrovsk areas, we weren't really able to get a lot of frontline news out of the Konstantinivka front. We did get to see that around Pokrovsk, we have been able to get the report that the Russians have brought in the naval infantry. Oh, God. They've done poorly throughout the rest of the war, so I'm not really expecting much from them. We also were able to see the Ukrainians of the 38th Marines targeting and destroying Russian vehicles within the southern area of the front near the Selidove. Take a little look. That's not a request, that's a demand. Look, damn it. We can see right here a Russian tank, and here comes the drone. Oh. Nothing like mama's home cooking. Oh, look at this. It's a BMP. You wouldn't really be able to tell that.
Bringing in Papa to give him some of that Euro Papa. Look at this. Smashing in with some of that European technology.
Вот так-то. Вот твою мать. Диета красной площадь. Oh.
Hey, would you like to wake up with some espresso macchiato?
Espresso macchiato, macchiato, por favore. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. Very nice to see, and good to know that they were able to hit a couple of them. Moving on from that and on down to Velika Novoselka, we also got to see the 31st Mechanized Brigade taking out a motorbike assault. These never really seemed to work out. Oh, look,
Oh.
that guy,
It was like a
guy
missile.
zoomed like right into an anti-personnel mine. Yeah, and then he's gone.
Man, that guy accelerated like a hypersonic, like at the last second, like a damn Kenzel or something like that. Thing took off.
I think that
it
had to
literally
have been
accelerated
sped
last
up.
second.
That had to have been sped up, man. There's no way that he was going that fast through that field, man. Absolutely no way.
I don't buy it either.
And wasted. There they go. And another one. Oh, what the hell? I don't know what that was, but it blew up 3 times. Well, I guess you say the 3rd time is the charm. The motorbike assault continues, with many of their comrades falling around them. You would think they'd give up, but they are a little bit persistent. Oh, man. Someone said, you get paid to talk shit in an accent. Honestly, yeah, that's kind of like true. But, I mean, hell, whatever to make a living, right? I mean, it's, it's better
We
than...
talk so much shit that the generals take notice.
Oh!
My father drives a Rolls Royce.
My father drives an Aston Martin. My father drives a Rolls Royce. But moving on from that and into the area of Chornomorsk, we were able to hear that unfortunately a large fire did break out in the Ukrainian port town after a Russian hit, which we were able to see in this clip right here.
Ебануться нахуй.
Oh, wow.
Apparently it was the conveyor.
Я ебу нахуй.
Oh.
I think there's a warning sign going off here, or like a smoke detector is going off or something. There must be a fire. It would be it would kind of be expected if you heard like that smoke detector low battery beep at the Russian plant. Like I would expect to hear that.
Yeah, I would say, Oh! Well, 18-wheeler. And we also get to see another clip of the fire from across the way in the bay at Chornomorsk.
The fire was very hot, very steaming, very boiling.
And it toasts. But without further ado, folks, we have now covered all of the news from around the world, and it's time for us to make it into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on this very day of the fire. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Bitch!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Продовжується активний наш дипломатичний тиждень. На всіх рівнях ми працюємо. Сьогодні завершився ще й важливий парламентський саміт Групи Семи, і Україна була представлена. Голова Верховної Ради України Руслан Стефанчук зустрічався зі спікерами парламентів Канади, Америки, Франції, Німеччини, Британії, Італії. Також з президенткою Європарламенту. Всі підтримують нас, Україну, наш захист, наше прагнення до надійного та тривалого миру. Я хочу подякувати за це. Загалом тиждень вийшов, на мій погляд, дуже результативний. Європа, Сполучені Штати, Канада, Австралія, Нова Зеландія, Японія – це географія підтримки та заходів тільки за цей один тиждень. Коаліція охочих – 35 країн. В гарантіях безпеки для України – 26 країн. Це змістовні речі на землі, в небі, на морі, також у кіберпросторі. Також це фінансування для нашої армії. Найголовніше – це достатньо сильна українська армія, щоб точно була гарантована наша незалежність, суверенітет України. А отже, це зброя для армії. довгострокове фінансування для української армії. Багато цих компонентів ми погодили з партнерами за основу. Також створюємо нові спільні виробництва зброї. Перше в історії Україна почала будувати спільний завод з Данією на території цієї країни. Це буде виробництво компонентів для наших ракет, для наших дронів, зброї, яка вже дуже добре проявляє себе. За час цієї війни Україна вже вийшла на показник майже 60% зброї, яка у нас є, яка у наших воїнів. Це українська зброя, це сильна зброя. Багато передових речей. Звісно, є цілі, яких треба досягти. Це, зокрема, виробництво в Україні та разом з Україною систем протиповітряної оборони, різних типів систем. Це виклик. Ми і до цього маємо прийти. Україна вже довела, що у виробництві зброї ми серед найкращих в світі. Дякуємо за це кожному, хто розвиває український оборонний сектор, хто розробляє нові зразки української зброї. Я хочу подякувати всім нашим людям, які просувають технологічний розвиток нашої держави. Наступний тиждень теж має бути доволі активним. Серед іншого, ми готуємось до формату Рамштайн. Ми працюємо також, щоб були нові внески партнерів в програму Pearl. Це дуже потрібна програма. Ми завдяки цій програмі ми купуємо американську зброю. Завдяки програмі і вже там більше 2 мільярдів доларів. Ми будемо ще збільшувати це фінансування. Серед головних пріоритетів для всієї нашої роботи з партнерами – більший захист неба, захист проти російських шахедів, проти російських ракет. Зараз знов в нашому небі російські ударні дрони були, ППО наше працює, були удари протягом дня по Запоріжжю, по Херсону, по інших наших містах, наших громадах. Щодня ця російська загроза, і значить, щодня ми маємо додавати силу Україні. Саме так і робимо. Дякую всім, хто допомагає. Дякуємо всім, хто захищає нашу державу. Слава Україні!
And the Heroum Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1291 of the War News stream. And it's time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks. Is it a fun segment? Oh, it is. There's no question about it. This is one of the funnest segments of the night because we get to do anything and you all get to ask and speak of anything except for religions, politics, whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or climate change. Those are the topics that are off the table. Remember what your old folks said back at home, everyone? The two things you don't talk about in public are religion and politics. Well, folks gotta learn because they were right. Crazily enough, age-old knowledge. It stops so many fights from happening, and we just talk about what's going on out there in the world at large, like foreign policy and all that sort of stuff, and reasonably and rationally. And that's what makes the channel so great, and that's what makes the community of the Lee Spring Army so great, is that they talk about it reasonably and rationally. They're smart, intelligent, and discerning people, and that's what makes it fun to run these shows, just because we have an army of y'all here. But beyond that, I gotta say that it has been an absolute honor to run the stream tonight. It's, of course, going to be the last stream until the 11th of September, because we had 15,000 people here at the peak tonight, and over 100,000 people have watched in less than 2 hours. And I gotta say, what a humdinger, and a really amazing thing to know that so many of y'all have been here tonight enjoying the stream and watching it. And I also have to say a massive thanks to anyone who may have been new here tonight, and if y'all have enjoyed, make sure to subscribe. And to all the folks who have been here for a while and have already subscribed, a huge thank you to all of y'all as well. And so with that, Matthew, it's time for us to get on into all them questions. And so, what do we got?
All right. So also, folks, by the way, just to answer this question, I will be covering any breaking news that's happening throughout the time that the Enforcer is gone, starting tomorrow. So tomorrow is Sunday. We got Monday, which we didn't have a stream that day anyway. But it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll be back on Thursday of this upcoming week. So we'll be good to go. So once the Enforcer comes back from his deployment of his trip, he'll be able to join us again on the stream.
You weren't
and stuff
supposed to say that,
So
man. You weren't supposed to say that. What the hell, man?
I wasn't supposed to say
God,
that.
they're putting me on an op,
no.
everyone. They're putting me on an op. The folks up top, They told me I have to go and do something, and we don't like to admit that on air, but he just slipped it. So that's what's happening. That's what's
Yeah,
happening.
they told you to go find a place to live, so that way you're not in a cardboard box. That's what they told. That's the deployment. They said,
That's the
go
deployment.
find just something other than a cardboard box. You can't use that to live in. It's going to get wet. It's going to sag, and it's going to suck. And also, you can't put your computer in it too, so that would suck.
I actually heard that you could get a combat ribbon for going to Chirac, and that's what I plan on doing, folks. I'm gonna give myself a ribbon. But anyways, with that, we're just playing around with y'all. It's a trip to find HQ 3.0. But with that in mind, folks, it is time for us to get on into all of that incredible questions that we have, and there's an army.
Yes,
a lot of them.
Indeed. And also, by the way, folks, like I mentioned, I will be doing midday videos, though, on those days. So the news will be covered, by the way. There won't be a live stream just because we kind of decided in the background just not to have the live streams during that time. I could run them while the enforcer's gone, but it's a lot for one person to handle. And I'll be honest with you, it's going to be a lot less of a full package if just one of us is running it. The enforcer, he usually runs the live streams normally, so he's experienced doing that. I've really never run the live streams my own, so while I'm capable of doing it, it would be quite a handful. So I think we're going to stick to doing videos while he's gone, and maybe one day, maybe I'll do some streams, maybe on my own channel or something like that. We'll have to see. But anyways, I'm sure we'll have a lot to cover in the videos because it looks like things are going to pop off. And I'm hoping that nothing crazy happens while he is gone, because we would like to be able to run a stream on the breaking news, because we enjoy covering it live while it's happening, like in the moment. So the videos would be probably put out a couple hours after something happened, but it would be out there, though. We would have coverage of it in some form or another. But anyways, with that, folks, we are now jumping into... Also, Bobo said, "Are you insecure with doing live videos?" No, not insecure about doing. I'm capable of doing the live streams like completely, but it is a lot to handle though with just one person. I will admit it's quite a bit. And also I don't have a whole bunch of experience in it either, so it'd be basically throwing me into the deep end all at one time. But maybe one day I will. But anyways, jumping into our super chats here. This one goes to K-Dub Janky. And K-Dub put in a $100 donation. Yay! And thank you very much, K-Dub, for that $100 support. We do appreciate that very, very much. And he said, keep the news coming and take one from the chat, and the stream is awesome.
And I gotta thank you for the massive support, K-Dub Janky, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, thank you so much for enjoying the news. And we will make sure to keep it coming as much as we can. And we also will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor, K-Dub Janky. But thank you so much for finding the streams to be awesome. We put in a lot of work and effort to make these things possible every single night. And I'm happy to know that a lot of people find them to be of high quality. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we will make sure to get that live chat in honor of K-Dub Janky.
And the live chat question is going to go to none other than Bama FPV, who said, is Russia building up with conscripts?
Russia is, well, from what we know, they're not really building up with conscripts. It appears that they're trying to do voluntold professional army soldiers at the moment to try and skirt their way around the whole fact of not using conscripts. So technically they're not, but in a way they kind of are by their forced induction of professional soldiers in contract, Niki, as they call them inside the Russian Federation. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again, K-Dub Janky, for the support and sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I just want to say this, folks, just to clarify, by the way, I'm not scared to run the live streams or something. Like, I see some people like Green saying, you got to believe in yourself, Enforcer Matt. No, I've got no problem. Like, I can talk in the live streams and things like that. It's just some administrative things in the background that we're kind of like trying to work out with that. So it's not really a matter of I can't do the live streams. It's more of a matter of decisions in the background. Let's just leave it at that. So anyways, moving on to our next one here. This one is going to go to Susan LUK, who's a very long time channel legend as well, and puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Susan, for that very generous support. And I do not see a comment attached with it, but thank you very much once again for always supporting the channel. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support, Susan LUK. And while you didn't throw in a comment, it is folks like you who helped to make this channel possible and keep it rolling. I gotta thank you incredibly once again for the support, because it is folks like you who helped to make this thing possible and help to keep it rolling. So with that, a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, there's some people asking, hopefully the enforcers can find a place. I've already found a place, by the way, like just to make that perfectly clear. I made one trip out there, and I was still live streaming during that trip. Y'all probably heard me in the hotel on Let's see, it was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. During that time, I was able to actually locate a place and lock it down. So I am good to go on my end of things. So it's the enforcer's turn on this trip. He's not vacationing, by the way, if people were wondering that. He's doing the exact same thing I just did. He's looking actively for some place to make Enforcer HQ 3.0 for him. So that's what we're doing this time. So some people are saying, oh, enjoy the vacation. Trust me, he's not vacationing. He is working the entire time he's out there, because we try to make that trip as short as possible, because we hate taking time off the air. And now is a really bad time to take time off the air, but we have to do it right now because we have to lock down a place to be, because our lease is going to be up here pretty shortly, and we have to be able to make sure we can move our HQ really, really quick, because we want to minimize our downtime. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Sports Card Auctioneer, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, "Fly Eagles fly here, and God bless the LSA and the other men and women of reason, and have a great show. And I still watch you every morning, as there are many of us who can't watch your live streams, and thank you for sticking with it, and LSA forever."
And I gotta thank you massively for support, Sports Card Auctioneer. And I gotta say that a huge thanks to you for still being here and watching. I actually was wondering where you were for a while, but you're back with a new name, actually, a rebranding of a sort. And I gotta say that that's a really cool rebranding right there. And I gotta say, of course, the Lee Spring Army is an absolutely incredible thing, a wonderful thing. And thank you so much for still watching our streams, although they're just in the mornings, not at nights like they are right now. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you for still being with our channel for years and sticking with it and supporting this channel to help it to keep on running. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Hokey Redneck once again, and he puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Hokey, for that support as well. And he said, send one to Andrew. Oh, really? He said that will confuse him, and want a Andrew question to himself.
Dang, that's a tall order right there, Hokey Redneck, because usually I'm waiting to answer other people's questions, not my own. That is a little bit of a tongue twister right there. So let me see if I can get some inspiration for something that I could ask myself that folks might be interested in the live chat. So let's see here. Let's see.
Well, you got to come up with your own question, though. You can't answer the live chat question. That's against Hokey's rules right there.
Well, I mean, I really don't have any questions for myself, honestly, because I don't really know what in the world I'd ask myself at the moment.
I got you a question.
Sure, go ahead, shoot.
So let's see here. So Hokey said, let's see here. He said, give him a question to himself. Let's see here. Actually, scratch that. I don't have a question for you. I lied.
All right, well, we're back to square one. So with that in mind, let's see. I see some people talking about watch out for Ogden. They have gangs. So I guess I'd ask myself the question, are there a lot of gangs out in Salt Lake? Probably not. If I had to answer my own question, I've personally never been to Salt Lake before. This will be my first time. But I would generally say that if there are gangs in Ogden, it's probably not that big of a deal. There are gangs everywhere in Alabama, so we're not really unfamiliar with that sort of territory. Alabama isn't exactly a safe place in most major cities. So I hope that does address my own question well. And a big thanks to you once again for support, Hokey Redneck, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to ask myself questions. And what an honor it was to ask the Enforcer a question and get an answer from the Enforcer. I've never actually had that happen, and now I feel quite blessed, really. I'm very blessed. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that this addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I see people saying Salt Lake is one of the safest places to be in, Matt. And it is. Like, Salt Lake City is safe. Ogden, I actually drove to Ogden on my first trip out there. Ogden was not my favorite place. Ogden felt a little sketchy, I'm not going to lie. Like, Ogden felt like maybe the rough part of Utah, maybe. And I know we have some people in the live chat that live there in Ogden. I'm not trying to bash your city or anything like that, but it felt like it was not as well put together as Salt Lake City and the surrounding areas. It didn't really feel like what I was trying to go for, or probably what the Enforcer's trying to go for either. So that's probably not the thing. Also, by the way, I see people saying Mormon gangs. The Mormons aren't gangs, by the way, folks. Like, the Mormons are not into that sort of thing right there. They're a church. But also at the same time, though, I will say this, though. The Mormons have balls. Like, I saw the Mormons actually going door to door in the hood. And I saw that in a video that I just got done watching about Detroit. And I was like, damn, they got the Mormons like going door to door in the hood. Like, I'm talking about like the hood, like where there's like gangs, like legit gangs in the hood. Like, they were actually going through there fearless. I was like, damn. I was like, they got some balls on them for doing that. And even the guy who was making the video was like, damn, they got some balls for this. This is dangerous territory in here. And they're just walking around like it's safe.
Interesting. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Joe Rutland said, I live out here in Salt Lake City. I think we got a lot of people in the chat that live out there in Salt Lake City. They're coming out of the woodwork now that we said we're moving there. They're speaking in the live chat now. We're glad to have all y'all, by the way. But our next one here goes to Hokey Redneck, and Hokey put in another 50. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support. He said, "Does Deutschland have Poland's back?"
And I would have to say that Germany most likely does have Poland's back because they're all a part of NATO, so they're technically supposed to all have each other's backs. So I would say that the answer to that is yes. I think that Germany will come to Poland's aid if a war began. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, did you decide on sleeping at all, or were you going to stay up all night? What was the decision?
Generally staying up all night.
Oh, damn. So, by the way, folks, Enforcer's staying up all night. Like, he's getting no sleep, none, zero sleep. It's all sacrifice for the stream tonight. So, that's a big applause for the Enforcer. He's toughing it out tonight. Kind of like I did, actually, when I left for my flight. I actually toughed it out, too. I didn't get any sleep the night before the flight. So, I was up for like, I don't know, 25, 26 hours straight. So, that's a doozy there. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat. This one goes to Susan LUK, who puts in a $50 donation once again. And thank you very much, Susan, as well. She said, I couldn't put all my support in at once as YouTube doesn't seem to like it, but keep up the great work, chaps.
And a big thanks to you for the support, Susan LUK, and helping this channel to keep rolling. And I gotta say, I don't know why YouTube is like picky in particular about that sort of thing from time to time, but we thank you incredibly for supporting the channel and helping this thing to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, to keep running shows like these for 1,291 days as of today. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a 30, and thank you very much, Marion, for that support. Excuse me, by the way, goodness. Marion said, Slava Ukraine, and Hiram Slava.
And a big thanks to you for the support, Marion. And of course, Slava Ukraini, Hurram Slava. And a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that amazingly well. And of course, if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make it to this point. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here is going to go to Cypress96, who put in a $28 donation, and thank you very much, Cypress, for that support. He said, for the We'll Miss You, but have a good trip fund, and take one from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Cypress96. And I gotta say, thank you so much for saying that you're gonna miss me. Hopefully folks will. I would like to think that people enjoy having me on the channel. And so a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And that live chat question requested by Cypress is going to go to BC Mapper, who said, has Venezuela succumbed to the Chinese Belt and Road program?
I would say somewhat, kind of. The Belt and Road program is kind of a bit of a failure to some extent, at least in the time frame it was originally supposed to be working with. But to a degree, you could actually argue that Venezuela kind of has a lot of the key symptoms of a country that is connected heavily to the One Belt, One Road program. So I'd say, in a sense, yes. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat the best I can. And a huge thanks to Cypress96 once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support from In Hansen. And In Hansen, thank you very much for that support. They said the U.S. administration changes DOD to Department of War, and then activity advances a proposal to emphasize domestic defense by shifting the Pentagon's strategic priorities. Mixed messages much. I would say so. Definitely mixed messages, just from a neutral standpoint. Here's the thing, folks. This isn't political. I got to make the disclaimer. I got to do it. But, this is supposed to be the peace plan here, but we're turning the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and we're about to start a war in Venezuela. That doesn't sound like peace to me. That sounds like we're sort of acting, I guess you could say, in preemptive defense, I guess you could call it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it is a little bit of odd messaging, at least in my opinion, but I've also heard a lot about what the possible national defense strategy publication is going to look like soon. Some people are saying that we're going to emphasize deterrence against Russia and China. Others are saying that we're going to back off of everything and just defend the United States itself on a domestic defense level. So there really is quite literally everything across the board at this point. So I'd have to say that the messaging is really confused and also mixed to some extent. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Rye Guy SR. And thank you very much, Rye Guy, for that support as well. He said, keep the news coming. And can we get you guys your projections on the Ukraine war and U.S. role in the war and NATO? And I feel as though the current admin dislikes NATO leaders because they don't bootlick. Slav Ukraine, LLT, LSA. And for my projection there, since you're asking both of us about it, I would say my projection is the Ukraine war is going to be a more multi-year war. It's not going to be ending this year. It's probably not going to end next year either. Until the Russian economy comes collapsing down, which I'm not really sure if it will, because it looks like China is going to prop them up and bail them out. If China does continue bailing Russia out, this war is going to continue indefinitely, in my personal opinion. So my projection is, unless something drastically changes between Russia's allies, this thing's going to go on for a long time. And it looks like the U.S. is more than willing to help Ukraine remain armed. We are sending billions worth of weaponry to Ukraine and our allies to sell to them. And it looks like it's going to continue. So I don't see any end in sight. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's a little bit of an interesting situation because it appears that the president understands that we can't just leave NATO, and it also appears that he doesn't really like him too much. So I generally have to say that I would be kind of down the middle of the road. It doesn't really seem that he personally likes them because, once again, not really a lot of bootlicking going on, if we want to put it that way. But at the same time, it's also understood that NATO is an indispensable sort of an alliance that the United States is a part of. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to none other than Scuba Side, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Scuba Side, as well for that support. He said, wife asked me why I haven't donated yet. Well, today is her birthday, by the way. And happy birthday, Ariane. And pronounced Ariane. Oh, Ariane, by the way. And also, happy birthday to Ariane, by the way. And thank you very much, Scuba Side, for that support. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a big happy birthday to Ariane. And I got to say a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running on Ariane's birthday. That's great to hear. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying the channel enough to find it worthwhile to support it and help it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it rolling. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jocelyn White, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Josh, as well, for also being a longtime channel legend. And it's good to see you once again. And they said, thanks for the dedication through the years. And take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Jocelyn White, and thank you so much for enjoying the dedication through the years. We try our best, and we will make sure to get one from the live chat. So what do we got?
So the live chat question goes to Canada is Sovereign, who said, was the Russian buildup near Finland expected?
I would generally say that if we were going on with the framework that a war with Europe would be inevitable, I would say that I generally expected that because they will have to build up their forces along most active front lines, which would be the NATO border or the NATO frontier, so that would include Finland. So I generally say that I was expecting it, but not this soon, actually. I was actually expecting this to happen most likely towards the very latter part of this year, towards October to December, and not exactly now. Because usually the winter months are months of low activity, and or also due to the extreme cold, especially in that area, would be the perfect time to move forces into position because the chances of a counterattack at that point would be negligible or non-existent if that was a concern. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next super chat here, while I grab one more from our live chat here. This one is going to go to none other than Brian Anjaneski. And Brian puts in a 20 and says, I'm just looking at the border between Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Norway looks to have played it smart over the years and took all the coastline. No Sweden, no swimming for you, and LSA.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting thing because Norway, Sweden, and Denmark actually all used to be a part of a single country, which was the Kingdom of Sweden for the larger part. Then Denmark ended up, Denmark then ended up becoming one of the main kingdoms, and that's why you'll actually see, even still, on Swedish coats of arms. Let me see if I can go pull up the Swedish coat of arms. Swedish coat of arms. You'll actually see 3 crowns. If we're looking at the right one, this one right here. And that's to symbolize the tri-monarchy that existed during that time. It, of course, doesn't even exist now. It generally was headed by the Swedes and later on the Danes. And then Sweden and Finland, well, Sweden and Norway ended up becoming their own independent countries, separate from each other. And then Denmark continued to control the territories of Iceland and Greenland, which are still, well, Iceland is an independent country now, but Greenland is still a territory of Denmark. So some fairly interesting stuff. with that, honestly. But that's kind of why their borders are the way they are between Norway and Sweden, because really beyond them being inner kingdoms within a larger kingdom, it really didn't matter if Sweden got a lot of coastline in the Norwegian Sea, and also Sweden had a lot of coastline inside of the Baltic, because they pretty much literally got all of the coastline inside the Baltic. So a little bit of an interesting sort of a deal with that. But anyways, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Brian Edgenaski, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Keymaster, and Keymaster puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. And I do not see a comment attached, but we do appreciate you, Keymaster, for always being a longtime channel legend. And we also have a 20 from Inflamed Jenna, last name Tolls, and they put in a 20 and said antihistamine. I need it.
And I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support. Inflamed Jenna, last name Tolls. And I gotta say, you might actually need that, given your name. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $15 support from Live Laugh Toaster Bath. And thank you as well for that support right there. And they said, good evening, Enforcers. And happy Father's Day to all the dads out here in Australia. And also, it's Father's Day in Australia. That's crazy. That was a long time ago for us. But they said, please take one from the chat and LLT LSA.
And happy Father's Day to all the fathers of Australia. Our Father's Day was quite a while ago. But I got to thank you massively for the support, Live Laugh Toaster Bath. And I also got to say that we will make sure to take one from the chat. So a massive thanks to you so much for the support. Long live the Lee Spring Army. And what do we got?
And this one goes to And Pro, who said, do you think Putin must escalate war in the near future?
I would say that he most likely does, because with the kind of economic timeline that exists for the Russian economy before it collapses, there's not really a lot of time to do anything left. So if there isn't a lot of time to do anything left, that's going to accelerate the escalation. So I would say yes. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $15 support from Cody Bell. And thank you very much, Cody, for that 15 as well. He said, do you think that the U.S. actions against both Venezuela and Iran are designed to install friendly regimes or make a deal in order to gain control over oil supplies so they could checkmate the Chinese?
And I'd have to say, I thank you for the support, Cody Bell. And I would have to say, yes, generally we're trying to install friendly regimes and also contain the Axis powers, specifically the Chinese. And so I would say that, yes, that's generally our objective within both areas, but primarily with Iran, it's to stop them from developing a nuclear weapon, more so than anything else. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, can you hear me? I'm hearing lag.
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so there's a slight delay, but I think it's going away. But anyways, our next one here is going to be a super chat from River Kistler. And thank you very much, River, for that $20 support as well. He said, wife is currently getting epidural. And so I'm in the waiting room watching you guys. And I just have to ask how near World War III is. So if my newborn daughter is going to be born during it.
I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support, River Kistler, and also, great to hear that you're soon to have a daughter, being brought into the world. You're a very lucky man right there. And I gotta say that, World War III, it's, if nothing changes, I don't want to sound like an alarmist or anything, so, don't get panicked by this information, but if things keep going the way they are, we're guaranteed to get into a world war, or a major war at this point, within the next 3 to 5 years. But at the same time, there is a chance, a decent chance out there, that everyone's going to attempt de-escalation, hopefully, and we'll see that everyone ends up coming up with compromises and the conflicts are resolved without us really having to get into a full-blown shooting war. So I would generally say that with how things are going right now, which we just kind of have to work on the day-to-day, if things keep escalating like they have been for months, we're most likely going to see an outbreak of a major war, a world war somewhere. But there is also the chance for de-escalation. So it's not guaranteed. It's just that based off of what we're seeing today, it looks like that might be happening in the future. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. A big congrats to you once again, and a big thanks to you for support, River Kistler, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Octavian Timorsanu, and he puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Octavian, as well, for that support. He said, have you heard that the U.S. has reportedly stopped funding NATO operations, joint operations, with European allies on NATO's eastern flank? And do you view this move as a form of appeasement toward Russia?
And I'd have to say, I thank you for the support, Octavian. And, let's see. I have actually heard about that. We actually reported on that several days ago. I don't really think it's necessarily a form of appeasement. I think it's more so that we may be expanding our forces' presence within the area and maybe adding more brigades under the command of 5th Corps or U.S. Army Europe and Africa, and may actually raise a new corps or stand up a new corps, as it would be called by the technical definition, within the area that may be bolstering the forces within the Baltics by default. So the additional funding to help train and support those forces may be unnecessary because we'll also have liaison forces there anyways. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Octavian, but that appears to be the current assessment of the situation at the moment. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Dupper, as well, for that support as well. And he said, Slav Ukraine.
And Slava Ukrainian, Ram Slava. And a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Rar Dakota. And Rar Dakota put in a 10 as well and said, I love the work y'all do. Keep it up. And the world is getting crazier and crazier every day as of late. And thank you for keeping us informed and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Ronald Rakota, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for wanting us to keep it up. We try our best to keep this thing running day in and day out, year after year, month after month. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying our efforts and supporting it to help us to keep it rolling. So a humongous, incredible thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Wait What, who puts in a 10. And Wait What said, will you stop with the super chats? What? He said, I can't even read my own post. LOL, I'm just joking, and LOC.
And I think you were the support, Wait What? I was like, huh? I was like, what do you mean? But still, a huge thanks to you for the support, Wait What? Because the super chats are pretty much the only way that we keep this channel afloat on a day-to-day basis. The whole thing is pretty much supported by the viewers themselves. And I gotta say that it's an incredible thing to know that a lot of people enjoy the channel enough to support it and help us to keep this thing running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support here from Tyler Harris. And Tyler said, have a safe trip and you'll be missed. Always a highlight of my night. And I have a question. Can we see the marmot before you go? And long live the LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And we can see the marmot. Why not? And let's go take a look at it here really quickly. And here we are. It is the marmot. Oh, hello there.
Oh, hello there. Oh, hello there, Governor. The enforcer's going to be leaving on a plane tomorrow, yeah? He's going to be getting on a plane, then he's flying really, really high and very nice. He's going to get on the plane like a royal aristocrat, I guess you could say. Get on there all with the little pack and the little carry-on bag and everything. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but the marmot's, he's tongue-tied tonight. He's got teeth, he's spitting blood. You can't expect him to think clearly. But what's a fly say, eh?
Aw, man, I need a desk and a chair and a trip to D.C. Aw, man.
Sorry, Governor, but desks and chairs are reserved for workers, not bums.
Oh, man. But that is the marmot and the fly. And I hope that you enjoyed the marmot and fly, at least the last one before we are off air for several days, at least for the live streams. And I got to thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to World War III in our time, who puts in a 10. And they said, here since your first week, non-political, pro-democracy, and timely news, which has helped me deal with family passings. And also, I'm sorry to hear about that. He said, what if Russia did a high nuke airburst on Kaliningrad coast?
I hate to hear about your family passing, so it's unfortunate to hear about. But I do thank you so much for enjoying our channel, and I'm glad to know that's been helping you out during tougher times like that, because I'm sure that it's not easy to get through. But outside of that, an airburst nuclear, a nuclear airburst near Kaliningrad, it's a high likelihood that that would happen, especially by the Russians, because generally that wouldn't pose them any benefit, and if anything, it would fry the not really the electromagnetic systems, but it would fry the computer systems of the Baltic flotilla that they have inside of the town of Baltisk in the Kaliningrad Peninsula, well, more so the Oblast. So I generally would say that it would be a little unlikely, at least in my opinion, but there's a chance. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Chargy, and Chargy puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Chargy, for that support as always, and being a longtime channel legend as well. And he said, LOT, and thank you, boys, for the efforts. Love you, and take one from the chat.
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Shargy, and I gotta say, thank you so much for enjoying our efforts. We try our best, and hopefully it shows through somehow. But nevertheless, we will be making sure to get one from the live chat in your honor. So what do we got?
And the live chat question goes to Triberium, who said, "Did you guys hear about the military cartel and drug bust in Poland yesterday and somewhat today?"
I actually did not. Usually, a lot of internal news like that inside of the Baltic states and Poland usually flies us by. It's not really something we see on the radar too much, and very rarely do we include in our coverage. So I'd actually have to declare ignorance on that. Haven't heard about that, but we did hear about weapons caches being uncovered inside of southern Finland. But I do hope that does address it the best we can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a big super chat here from Mark Dixon. And Mark put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mark, as well, for supporting the channel and helping to keep it running. I do not see a question attached to it. So nothing to address, sadly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you massively for support, Mark Dixon, because folks like you have helped this channel to keep on running and made it possible. And I got to say that it's an absolutely wonderful and incredible thing to know that folks like you enjoy the channel enough to want to support it and help it to keep on running. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Richard Huff. And Richard said, "With Zapad and Iron Defender happening simultaneously, a few miles from each other, what are the odds a soldier from either side gets a little antsy and inadvertently triggers a start of war and LSA?"
The chances are generally low because they're if the Russians aren't planning an invasion, the general rule of engagement will be to not fire on anyone that appears to not be Russian army personnel or anyone for that matter. So the chances of them getting into a full-blown battle accidentally is incredibly low. But there is always a small chance, a very, very small percentage. But generally we would go with the idea that that will not happen. More so, the Lithuanian Iron Defender exercises and the Polish ones are there to deter the Russians from conducting an invasion, but there wouldn't really be the chance of a sporadic firefight breaking out and the outbreak of war just because of the proximity of those war games to each other. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from No Please. And they said, "As a sergeant in the men's department of the Navy," interesting. He said, I'm happy to have you guys as a concrete source of news that is not only relevant, but is honest and raw. And keep it up, boys."
And thank you so much for the support, No Please. And I'm very happy to know that we meet your high criteria. And it's always good to know that folks enjoy the channel and want to help to keep on running so that way we can keep putting news like this out every single day. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Wait What once again. He said, "The Enforcers rock. Thank you guys, and LSA."
And thank you so much for the support, Wait What, and thank you for saying that the Enforcers rock. We try our best, and hopefully we succeed somewhat. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Bobo Vasquez. And Bobo said, "This is the pay for the utility costs of Enforcer Matt's future live feeds. Go LSAO."
And thank you so much for the support, Bubba Vasquez. And that's great to hear. Hopefully that'll go well. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Gary Bott. And Gary said, "Will the time change for the channel for the live streams?"
No, actually, we'll be running them at the same time at 10 p.m. Eastern time. It's just that our time when we're starting the show will be different. So it will be, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 8 p.m. Mountain time, if I'm not mistaken on the time zones, instead of 9 p.m. Central time, which is what we run it off of right now. But the shows will still run at the same time of day, because as far as it goes with running this as a live stream, time slots are a fairly important thing, and having a consistent schedule down is incredibly important. So it would make a lot more sense for us to revolve our work schedule around when y'all are familiar with the show starting, relative to the time universally for everyone in the day, rather than us to bump the show an hour ahead or back depending on where we're moving. So this show actually will still be running at the same time every single day, even still. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Honestly, it's good that it's being moved an hour back, honestly, because it actually lets us get off in a more reasonable time at night. And it's not changing for everybody, by the way. It's just us when we move there. It's an hour back because our time zone's central right now, and I think it's mountain time. I believe that's what Utah's on. Isn't it mountain time?
Yeah, I think it is mountain time. I think Pacific time is just for California, Oregon, and Washington, and I think Nevada. But everything else runs on mountain time, and then most of the central eastern part of the United States runs on Central time.
Okay, yeah. So we get to save an hour for us. So we get to actually reel it back. So we'll usually end the stream around 11:30 Mountain Time, but it's going to be the same time for everybody else. Though it's just going to change for us. So that might actually let us get some more sleep at night, maybe. So that might actually be pretty good. But moving on to our next one here, this one goes to Jack Ragnarsson, and he puts in a 10. He said, "Do you believe the U.S. will uphold their NATO obligations if the Zapad military exercises turn into an invasion?" And I'm feeling rather pessimistic, unfortunately, due to the rhetoric from the U.S. politicians.
I would have to say that we most likely wouldn't. We really wouldn't have a choice, because if we decide to turn a blind eye to that, America looks so weak, we might as well have lost everything as far as standing on the world stage, and there's a lot of consequences that would come from that. So generally, while a lot of people have harebrained ideas, we would have to follow through with supporting NATO in that kind of a conflict, because if we didn't, we're losing a lot of prestige and a lot of faith and credit with literally everyone around the world. We might as well be showing the North Koreans and the Chinese they could invade South Korea and meet no resistance whatsoever in the modern day, rather than the Republic of Korea's armed forces. So with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to the GOAT, and the GOAT put in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, GOAT, for that support. He said, "What happens if the shit hits the fan news-wise while you're off air? What will we do?"
Matthew will be making shortwave videos in the meantime, but that's why we don't really take a lot of time off air, is to make sure that we can be around in case of major things happen. It's just that this time we really can't, because I have to find a place to be, here in a couple of months, and if I don't find that, then we have bigger problems coming around in late October, because I won't have a place to live in. So that's generally why we're not really taking a lot of time off ever, and that's why we're pretty much here 24/7, 7 days a week, covering this thing, like slaves to an extent. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 5. And Robert said, "Not much, but LSA."
And thank you so much for the support, Robert. And thank you for helping the channel to keep on running, because any bit of support is massive support to us. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Christopher Duran for putting in a 5, and also Stefan Gudnason for putting in a 5 as well. But thank you very much to the both of you, Christopher and Stefan, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. And we also have another 5 from Robert Krogan. He said, "Do you think there will be boots on the ground in Yemen?"
I would doubt it. It doesn't really appear that the current administration has a lot of willpower to do that. If any fish was worth frying, it's that one. But for some reason, we're not willing to do that. So I don't really think we'll ever see boots on the ground in Yemen, at least for the remainder of this year and most of the next year. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Rye Guy SR, and he said, "Everyone hit the like button and LLT LSA."
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. We've gotten up to 3,800 likes, which is an absolutely incredible and amazing amount. And I got to thank you so much once again for wanting folks to hit the like button, because it is those folks who help this stream to reach more people and to pretty much promote the show in a sense. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I like it when people say that we don't have a boss, by the way. Everybody has a boss, by the way, folks. Like, if you're self-employed, you still have a boss even. Like, the boss becomes the employees at that point. So, like, for us, the boss is the YouTube algorithm. Like, we don't get to really set our hours and things like that. Like, we have to sort of, like, go with the algorithm. So, based on our experience, if you take too much time off or something, like, even if it's something, like, serious, YouTube doesn't know you're taking time off to go, move yourself across the country. It doesn't know that. So, it sometimes penalizes you for taking too much time off and actually dings you in their algorithm, at least based on what we've seen. So we're always cautious about that. Y'all might have noticed there is a Ukraine channel that was very, very popular, actually. But the guy took like a very long break, and his channel's never really recovered, which, scares the hell out of us. We're like, whoa, what the hell happened with that? We don't want to repeat that. But that's the thing. Like, we really do have a boss, and it's simply the algorithm.
Yeah, that's something that's a little bit important to explain to a lot of folks, is that we don't really have a lot of liberty or freedom to really pick our own hours. And that's kind of a thing that's misleading to a lot of people who do not do YouTube professionally, is that everyone acts like YouTube, as far as a business, is like something where you make money on the side. And if you actually want to make a living doing this, and a consistent one where this is your actual job, the YouTube algorithm pretty much makes it to where you have to dedicate yourself to it consistently all the time, endlessly, or else there isn't really a lot to be had in terms of a living. So it's not really a consistent kind of a job. So as far as it goes, we have to pretty much be on air no more than once a day on a live stream and no less than once a day on a live stream consistently, and YouTube's happy. If we do a lot more than what we're doing right now, the algorithm will ding us, and then we'll get knocked down in the algorithm, because then we're frequently uploading way too much compared to what the algorithm has decided is our standard. If we start to upload a lot less, then that also dings us very heavily, because then it shows that we're inconsistent with our schedule and we're not keeping people on the platform for an incredibly long amount of time. Thumbnails and titles do a lot to promote a piece of content, but another thing that does a lot to promote content, like our streams or our videos, is the consistency of them. So search engine optimization, which is SEO, only goes so far. A large part of it is what the algorithm thinks you are. So that's why it's kind of like, we don't really, it's not like we're our own bosses really per se. It's more so that the algorithm is kind of our boss. And then on top of that, folks, another thing is that kind of y'all yourselves, the viewers, are our boss as well, because if we become inconsistent with our scheduling, a lot of people are going to leave. That's not anything that is, special to our channel. That's how all of them work. And if you leave for a long enough time, and a lot of people decide to go elsewhere and get their news or their shows or information from elsewhere, we lose an audience permanently, and we don't get them back. So there's a lot of factors that are involved that make it to where we really can't do whatever we want. We kind of are forced to do the same thing, or as much of it as we can every day, or else the algorithm might punish us to an extent. So that's how it works for everyone on YouTube. So, if you ever see a YouTube channel that is doing this for a legitimate job, like we do, they don't take time off for incredibly long periods, and if they do, it usually ends up being pretty punishing for them. So just to explain that side of things, I do this on my end, me personally, because I absolutely love doing live streams. I find it to be pretty fun, and of course I started the thing because I wanted to do it, so I've got pretty good reason to do it. But at the same time, if you ever feel like you're getting burned out, which, to be honest with y'all, burnouts have happened through the years, you just got to keep pushing through them, because if you just give up and take time off because you're burned out, you might come back and have nothing left. So that's kind of the deal with working on YouTube. Bit of a catch to it. It's not really.
I've done lots of burnouts.
Oh yeah, I've done plenty. Endlessly at some points. But anyways, with that,
not too many though, because tires are expensive.
That's a funny one. But with that,
yeah, that was the most tough reaction I've ever heard to one. Jeez.
It's I got a lot of stuff on my mind. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, Green said, "How did you two meet?" We're brothers. That's how we met. Kind of like super early on, actually. So yeah. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to No Please, and No Please put in a $10 donation. Thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, "Here's a fun question: if Napoleon's France and Mussolini's Italy could arm wrestle, who would win?"
If Napoleon's France and Mussolini's Italy could arm wrestle, was that the question?
Yeah, Napoleon's France and Mussolini's Italy. So it's Napoleon versus Mussolini, basically.
Napoleon's France would win, because while Italy technically would have a technological advantage, they just suck. At least in World War II terms, they were terrible. So I think that Napoleon's France could actually beat them, at least in my opinion. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. Good question, by the way, interesting one. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Michael Tripto, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Michael, for that support as well. He said, "Why would anyone attack NATO? Are you insane?" Oh, no, we're not saying that somebody should attack NATO or somebody would be wise to do it. But, have you not seen Putin? I mean, the dude's a nut. He just invaded Ukraine, which made no sense. And people said that was crazy, but he did it. So don't underestimate the insanity of this guy. He's got buddies encouraging him too. He's got China, North Korea, Iran. He's got a gang with him now, so he feels emboldened. So don't rule anything out. It sounds crazy, I agree, but crazy is in the realm of possibilities these days. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to say that, of course, we're not saying anyone needs to attack NATO, but, the surrounding environment right now kind of shows that it's a possibility, and that's something that we have to talk about, consider, and analyze. So I do thank you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Wait What. And Wait What said, "As a gift to the viewers, me and Matt will now sing a song for you." Oh, who said that? Nobody said that. I'm not singing any songs. I'm afraid not. Wait, what? But thank you very much for that $5 support right there. And unfortunately, I'm not a singing man, Kitley. I'm not a singing man. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Duncan VR. And Duncan put in a 15 Australian, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And he said, Baba Moo. Nothing to watch for the next few days. That's not true, Duncan. I'm going to be putting out videos. But he said, can we hear Matt's Zelensky voice as the Marmot? Unfortunately, Duncan, I can't do them. I can't do the Marmot and Zelensky. Like those are tough. I can never mix those two. One's raspy and one is sort of like British. So I can give you the Zelensky voice and maybe give you a little sample of the voice, but it's only a little sample. If you'll simply give me the chance to simply work into the voice, maybe it'll work. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. But unfortunately, I'm not really good at doing either of those as well. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ryan Guy SR, and he puts in a 5. He said, smash the like, people, and LT, LSA.
And hit the like button, folks. We've actually gotten really close to 4,000 likes now. And a couple of extra likes would be nice. It'd be great to see that hit 4,000. But a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Foxglow. And Foxglow said, I think the buildup along the Finnish border is defensive preparation for a NATO retaliation to their own invasion of the Baltic states.
It's possible. Whether they are planning on conducting a multi-front offensive into Poland, the Baltics, and the Swolki Gap at the same time, they generally need to build up forces anywhere, like, for example, for a defensive operation like that, to make sure that they're not getting flanked. So I would definitely agree with you there. That could also be a reason why that is happening. But with that, a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Ryan H. And Ryan said, what if Venezuela uses Normandy-style defenses against U.S. troops storming the beach?
Well, that wouldn't happen. Precision strikes have made that sort of a defensive pattern for beach defense obsolete. So generally we wouldn't see something like that. And also, U.S. forces wouldn't land on a beach where resistance was that stiff these days. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 3 from Slamina Evil, and they said a CAF technician was found dead in Latvia and RIP.
And that's incredibly unfortunate to hear. I unfortunately didn't really hear a lot about that today. And I don't actually know exactly where it happened. I did see you asking about that earlier if we were going to cover that, and unfortunately we couldn't because I just didn't have enough information to work off of to speak on it. But it is very unfortunate to hear about, and I'm sure that his family is, of course, grief-stricken with the news. But
What's a CAF technician?
Unfortunately, I would actually not know off the top of my head.
Let's see, CAF technician. I'm curious, but I hadn't heard about this at all. Let's see here. Canadian Armed Forces, that's what it stands for, CAF. So let's see, a signal technician or a construction technician, one or the other. But so wait a minute, let me go back and look now. So you said a CF technician was found dead in Latvia. So a Canadian soldier was found dead in Latvia? That's kind of odd. Like I would assume the guy was probably younger, I'd imagine. So yeah, I hadn't heard about that at all. That's interesting. And also tragic.
Fatalities do happen from time to time. It may have been some sort of an incident or an accident, a car crash, or something along those lines. Unfortunately, I just don't know a lot about it, but it is very unfortunate to hear. But I do thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, and he puts in a 2. He said, LSA the like button, that's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order. We've been getting a lot of those orders tonight, and of course, from the original LSA Sergeant Figment, who was one of the first people on the stream who ever made that an order. And I got to thank you incredibly for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible and help us to keep it rolling. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I got to address this real quick. Arturo Hernandez said, you need to learn about Venezuela before you talk. War over in 24 hours. 95% won't change. That is the most short-sighted thing I've heard. That war would not be over in 24 hours. And if you're speaking solely about precision missile strikes, that is not going to end the war. That'll start it, but it's not going to end it. So you're saying an invasion of Venezuela, we could do that in 24 hours? That honestly, no offense to you, but that is insane. That is not going to happen under any circumstance. And also 95% wanting change. I'm not sure where that number is coming from either. So that seems a little bit far-fetched to me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that there's no timetable in history where a war has ended in 24 hours. Even invading Iraq in 2003 and pretty much occupying it and then arresting and then having Saddam Hussein executed took longer than 24 hours. So that generally would not be the case on any military timetable. Even if that was executed incredibly well, we would precede any ground operations or any operations for that matter where the government would truly be put under the strain to collapse with a day's worth of airstrikes leading up to that. So there's really no timetable that exists where this could end in 24 hours. Not even on the most optimistic one. That's like fantasy talk right there, saying that a war will end in 24 hours. No war ends in 24 hours. But with that,
That's that Russian talk. Like, when they said 3 days to Kyiv, they would have it in like 3 days or something, and then it turned into a humongous disaster mess. That was like the same talk they did.
yeah, and I mean, if you're doing something in 24 hours, like hell, let's just pull up Operation Just Cause. That might be the best example. The U.S. invasion of Panama lasted for 1 month, 1 week, and 4 days, with the actual invasion phase occurring about over the course of several days. So let me see if I can show y'all the series of events, or at least the amount of time it took over days. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're speaking of the offensive operations. Actually, right here, this is from the 20th of December to the 31st of January. A whole month. And it took them an entire month to span out from the Panama Canal Zone and to take a sizable area of the major population centers of Panama. That was a tiny country that at the time technically didn't even have a military. It had armed police as their military force, and it still took us a month. So there is no timetable out there on the planet, even with how unpopular Noriega was, to just completely collapse the government and win a war in 24 hours. That's a very unrealistic sort of a timetable. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Bobby43 once again. That is LC39A. He throws in another massive 150 Canadian support. And thank you very much, Bobby, for that massive support once again tonight. And he has an interesting statement. He said, believe it or not, I'm saving money because you'll be gone for a few days. LOL.
Hey, that's one way to look at it. That's a silver lining to it. Money will be saved by many super chatters because we won't be running a show for a couple of days. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $2 support from Toker. And thank you very much, Toker, for that $2 support. We do appreciate that. We also have a 2 from the Ice Griffin, who said, bring back Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth land.
And I would have to say, I'm not really one for territorial expansion, not even for Western aligned countries, but that is an interesting proposition. And Poland, Lithuania was a pretty cool country for their time. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from the Bashi, who put in that 2 and said, welcome to Utah and try a dirty soda. And me personally, I like my soda clean, personally. I don't like that dirty stuff right there, that dirty water soda. If you want that, I think Russia's serving up dirty sodas daily, dirty waters too. If you want a little bit of, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of, I guess you could say cholera in your water or something like that, go over to Russia. They got some nice blue water coming out the pipes. It's like, what's a blue soda out there?
Powerade?
Let's see, Fanta. Powerade, that's sort of like a soda. That's like a sports drink. But I guess like Fanta raspberry or something like that, they got it coming straight off the tap. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll actually give one a shot when I'm out there. Hopefully I'll be able to try one out, at least for the short time I'll be there. But a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also Bobo said blue milk. Nasty stuff coming out the water. It's like creamy blue water coming out of the Russian faucets in some place. It is disgusting. Y'all seen it before, and literally, I think every Ukraine YouTuber showed it at one point. It was nasty as hell. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Chef O'Death, who puts in a 2. He said, "Happy Father's Day from Australia, gentlemen, and LSA."
Hey, and a big happy Father's Day to all the folks down in Australia. And a big thanks to you for the support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Its Court. And Its Court said, have a safe and productive trip.
And thank you so much for the support. And hopefully you'll be safe and productive. I'm hopefully certain that it will be. But a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to, let's see here. Hold on a second. Let me check something. Let's see here. Hold on. Let me go back and look real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and read another one off. And I'm gonna see if I missed a super chat here. But this one goes to Ryan H, who puts in the two. He said, "Thoughts on the next gen Acela train?"
I think it's pretty cool. The Avelia Liberty is neat, and also it's got a pretty decent interior to it. Let me see if I can show the pictures here. Here is the Avelia Liberty. It's been in the country actually for years, but there were some teething issues that Alstom didn't fix in France, so they had to sit around for years while they were continuously being fixed. But honestly, the interior of it is a lot like the Brightline train. The seats are almost identical. Like, no joke. Like, it may as well be the same interior. Which, I gotta be honest with y'all, after riding the Brightline, I wasn't really a big fan of the seats. They were a little bit too tough, in my opinion. And these look to be of the same tough construction, like where the padding isn't really soft, it's more firm. But beyond that, it's not a bad train, and it's a good replacement for the prior Acela. So that's a pretty decent thing. But a big thanks to you for the support, Ryan H. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, also Tom Exman, I didn't actually miss your super chat. Believe it or not, I actually put it accidentally as a live chat question. So it was in the spreadsheet, but it got jumped in the wrong category. So sorry about that, Tom. But he said he put in a 10 and said, "You guys have a good and safe trip."
And thank you so much for the support, and hopefully we will. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Theo Nordland, who puts in the two. He said, "Do you guys think deep sea mining is crucial for the USA?"
I would say not really. I think that we can extract a decent amount of resources on land still, and also as far as the kind of ecological output, considering that fisheries are becoming stretched these days, we don't really want to do anything extra to disturb fisheries, considering that those are already starting to get depleted somewhat heavily in some areas of the world. So I generally would say that we are probably fine with no deep sea mining, in my honest opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Deadly Splinters, who puts in the two. And Deadly Splinter said, "Enforcer will restore peace through strength."
Hey, and that's generally what I believe. Some people might not be supporters of it, but, you know, it is what it is. But big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to keep this thing running. And so with that, it's time for us to move on into the live chats. We will, of course, be getting the Morse code decoders of the stream, a decent amount of live chats, and then we'll be rounding this thing on out. And so with that, we actually have one more super chat to address.
And this super chat right here goes to the Howard Mendelson, another longtime channel legend. And thank you very much, Howard, for that $20 support. He said, "I found the official marmot on the internet, and it was painted by Jacopo Legozzi in the 1500s.
Oh yeah, we already knew that one, Howard. Actually, we had talked about it before, and I actually did some research into that guy, and apparently he painted it off of what someone described a marmot to look like to him. So the painter never saw the marmot; he was just told what it looked like, and that's why it came out so wonky looking. Is because he actually didn't have a real reference himself for what it looked like, which is a really funny kind of a thing. But a big thanks to you for support, Howard, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the live chats. What do we got, Matthew?
And our first live chat question goes to Lee and Kate, who said, "Remove nuclear holocaust from the equation. How do you see World War III aftermath? And do you think the West will start cracking down on rogue states and dictators?"
I would generally say, and really quickly, let me make sure to find that so that way I can address the question myself. How do you see World War III aftermath? I would have to say that I would see the World War III aftermath to be very similar to what we saw post-World War II. Most likely the rise of new spheres of influence, somewhat differently shaped than what they were before. And the economy is going to be on a teetering knife's edge, much like it was at the end for most countries of the First and Second World War. And it would be a time of change. Not necessarily change where things would become better or worse, but things would start to evolve into a different form. The probably new ideologies would emerge out of that war, because there were a lot of new ideologies that emerged out of the First and Second World Wars in the aftermath of them and the experiences that people had during them. So I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, believe it or not, I know people aren't really keeping up with this right now, but people actually won that jackpot, by the way, that Powerball thing. Like, somebody actually has won that $2 billion right now. It's kind of crazy.
Dang, that's nuts. Do they have the name?
Oh no, they don't have the name. Like, and also if those people are wise too, they'll keep their name a secret because when you win like the lottery or something like that. Because I've heard stories about it, people will literally start getting mass harassed, like whoever won the lottery, because people are trying to get a little piece of it and a little chunk from those people. So they'll start like harassing them. People will start like heckling them and stuff like that. So yeah, like if you ever win the lottery, which the odds are like I don't know what the odds are. They're crazy out there. It's like you have better odds of getting struck by lightning than winning the Powerball, I think. So you got to keep that secret for a while. Go get you an attorney, an accountant, or something, because if you don't, you're going to be in some trouble.
Man, honestly, I don't know if I would want to win a lottery, to be entirely frank. But with that, we are on.
You know how much in taxes they take out of that, by the way? I think the lump sum amount before it jumped up to $2 billion almost. I think the lump sum was like you get 500 million out of that. Like if you take the lump sum payment, which is insane. They take so much taxes out of that. It's wild.
That's nuts. And how much would they take if you took it in like payment installments?
If you got the annuity, I think it might be the full amount if you get the annuity, I think.
Honestly, I just go with that. Like I really couldn't
Oh,
see.
well, I take that back. You get taxed on it as yearly income. So whatever you get monthly on that annuity, you got to report it as yearly income. So that's actually a worse idea right there. Take the lump sum, folks, if you ever win it, because the tax rates are going to go up most likely. So if you're dragging that out for like 60 years or 30 years or something like that, and you're getting paid the annuity, you're going to be getting taxed at a higher rate most likely later on down the road when they jack the taxes up. So actually, the lump sum sounds like a better idea.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat question here goes to Pat Corbin, who said, "Could the jamming be a way to interfere with any intel gathering on our forces?"
It's possible, but the high likelihood of electromagnetic interference like that is that it's trying to disrupt radio broadcasts within the area, such as comms inside of Venezuela and elsewhere. Also, to make it more difficult for the Venezuelan Air Force to figure out where it's at inside the Caribbean to further threaten U.S. forces. Because electromagnetic interference does affect navigational instruments, especially GPS, which the Venezuelan F-16s most likely are working off of primarily to be able to navigate around in the Caribbean. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Aussie Maddie C, who said, "What happened to the oil refineries covering themselves with anti-drone nets?"
They gave up on that because it turns out it didn't work too well, and the drones would usually just punch right through the nets and still make it to the refineries, or the explosion would be strong enough, even if it did hit the net and ended up blowing up on it, that it would still cause a fire and explosion inside the refinery. So we saw that most refineries ended up abandoning the drone net concept, and also it turned out to be incredibly expensive to cover a whole refinery with nets, because it's a pretty large area in terms of square miles. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, apparently the lottery tickets, the winning ones, was from Missouri and Texas. Why, wouldn't that be ironic if like Elon Musk won the lottery? Like that would be insane because Elon, I think, is in Austin, Texas. I think I'm not really sure where he lives full time, to be honest with you. But that would be insane if he bought like a lottery ticket or something like that and won the lottery. That'd be the worst luck I think in history at this point. But yeah, there's actually two winners, so I'm not sure how that works. That's kind of weird, actually. I've never really seen that. So I guess maybe they got to split it or something. Honestly, that kind of sucks, actually. Somebody actually finally won it, but they got to split it. So that's kind of bad. But anyways, jumping into our next live chat question. This one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, "Why is Poland so stuck on de-escalation, and are they being pressured to do so by any other NATO member, especially the U.S.?"
I would say they're probably being pressured to de-escalate, but also I would bet you that the Polish government probably feels that there's not a lot of political willpower inside of Poland to move forward with the actual war single-handedly against Russia. So for those two reasons, that's why they're most likely working on the de-escalation path, is that they've pursued the idea of possibly becoming more militant in their own defense. And then they saw that in terms of the political willpower in Poland, it may have not been that strong. And also the U.S. may be putting pressure on them as well, which is pretty much a double dip. So at that point, they'll start to de-escalate. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least from what I would be able to say. And with that, we're crazily enough on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Ultra Raptor, who said, a question from Garth. He said, "I'm helping to boost his question." Excuse me, by the way. Goodness. He said, "Is Russia sending first-class troops to the Baltic and Finnish borders, or sending troops unsuitable to fight in Ukraine?"
From what I would say, they're generally sending unsuitable forces all over. None of them are incredibly well trained or really well versed in what to do. So I'd say it's just really a poor force all around in all areas. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Level Operator. He said, why are the Western nations still publicly saying that Kaliningrad is Russian territory, and legally it is not since the 1948 conference in Poland, and Russia even signed that agreement?
The issue with that is that if they signed that agreement in 1948, then why didn't they hand it over then or ever since? It's ever since the end of World War II, Kaliningrad has been a part of the Soviet Union, and then later on a part of the Russian Federation. So I generally say that I don't really think that is a binding treaty. I actually wouldn't know about that one specifically. I'd have to look into it. And also, I would have to also say that the United Nations deems Kaliningrad to be a territorial possession of the Russian Federation. If they are, then that means it has to be. So, that's also what we're working with here. It is a part of the Russian Federation. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the last person that threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is 8th Day, who said, do you think the Suwalki Gap might be a distraction for the real invasion of Finland? And I think Russia might rush Helsinki and take northern Sweden and Norway to cover their north flank.
I would say that the Suwalki Gap isn't really a distraction. The Suwalki Gap is the most important thing that they could take, because by taking the Suwalki Gap, they are pretty much cutting off the entirety of the Baltics. That wouldn't really be a diversionary tactic, because they'd be wasting a key strategic maneuver that would cut off 3 NATO states from further NATO support to then conduct that as a diversion and then conduct an offensive into Finland, which could be entirely supplied and supported in its defense and also a counteroffensive. So I generally would have to say that if anything was going to be happening, an attack on Finland would actually be a diversionary attack for a Russian attack in the Suwalki Gap. To be entirely honest, with either one happening at the same time, it really doesn't matter which one's diversionary, because every single front will be opening up at the same time. The one in Kaliningrad, the one in the Baltics, and the one in Finland, because at that point, it's a complete war. And any borders that are along the Russian Federations is a war zone at that point. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, folks. And with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. We've reached a peak viewership of 15,000 people, and we've had a total viewership of 117,000 people over the course of this stream. An absolutely incredible thing to think about, because it used to be not that long ago that we didn't really reach those kinds of numbers, and nowadays, that's a fairly normal thing. I got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying and watching the stream tonight, and if y'all enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, folks, unfortunately, I do have to tell y'all once again that we will not be running a stream tomorrow or up until the 11th of September. Streams will return on the 11th of September once I return from the special operation. It's not a special military operation, it's just a special operation of a sort to find a Enforcer HQ 3.0. So, of course, with that, a big thanks to all of y'all once again. And in the meantime, Enforcer Matt will be the one making the short war videos. So with that, folks, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Granny, Hurram Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you again on Thursday night. If everything goes according to plan and all the flights show up on time, we will be back on Thursday night. So not too much longer. It's really only 3 nights off the air. So we look forward to being able to stream once again. And a huge shout out to all 117,000 people that were here by the end of the stream tonight. And we appreciate every single one of you very, very much. But with that, folks, I'll be making the short war videos in the meantime. So be sure to tune in for those midday if there is enough news to cover. If you don't see it, that's actually a good sign. That means there wasn't anything crazy happening that day. But if you see one, that means something crazy has happened. And I had a headline to make. So with that, thank you all for watching. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.